Alright, people, it is time to find out exactly where you stand on this whole Peacemaker Season 2 finale debacle, if you will. Is it really a debacle? No, not really. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a debacle at all. But it is a disagreement. There are people on either sides of the aisle. Was it underwhelming? Was it not underwhelming? And then there are those of us in the middle, like myself, who believe in the subjectivity of the situation and go, well, it was underwhelming, but I'm still not concerned about where we're headed with respect to the future of the DCU, and it's also not James Gunn's fault that we're underwhelmed because he just told the story that he wanted to tell. But hey, enough of my pontification on this. Let's dive headfirst into our emails, and we will begin, of course, with John R., who's leading off. And again, pursuant to some previous email shows, he's sent in a bunch this particular week. Let's start with this first one because he has these ordered, like he's got a first batch and a second batch, but I think he updated, like he sent, like when you send a new email to a chain and it like pushes it up further than the other one, he sends this first one that says my first batch of flight chat questions, responses, and or one or two cool things, but it's listed above what would be his second batch, if you will. But let's see what he has to say in this first one. Hopefully I'm reading them in order. Yeah, it looks like he sent this one on Wednesday, October 8th. So here we go. First of all, he's got responses. He says, Downtown Disney has a Star Wars cantina type place that allows you to build a cheaper version of a lightsaber than what they do at Galaxy's Edge. That's why it looks like one you can buy at a store, only you can customize the handle. Okay, this has to do with last week. He sent a picture of a customized lightsaber that he built at Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland. I think he went to Disneyland, if I'm not mistaken. And it didn't look like one of the $250 ones with the light up and whatnot that you build in the ceremony. But yeah, the cantina place he's talking about, I know about that. If I'm not mistaken, that cantina place is the same one where you can build the droids. I think it's the same place. I haven't seen the one, obviously, at Disneyland, but I've seen videos of the ones at Disney World, and I imagine it's the same place. Okay, cool. So there's two different ones that you can get, right? Because the ones that we can buy in stores with the normal, the plastic flip and doesn't light up or whatnot, yeah, that's... I did not know that you could customize the handle with that one. So that's cool. I do like that. All right, fair enough. Thank you for clarifying that one. He says, it's funny you mentioned fantasy football being similar to D&D and Magic. The wrestling role plays I've done was basically fantasy pro wrestling. Yeah, it's the same thing. It is. It's exactly the same thing. Just the sports jock version of D&D. A tabletop. No worries about that. Then he sent a link and said, check out this video when you get a chance. And what it is it's a video from somebody named LS Mark, a YouTuber that wrote a video or made a video about Seth MacFarlane basically doing The Orville, which is a show that I'm quite familiar with, although I have not watched in its entirety. So no, I did not watch the entirety of the video, John. It's 50 minutes long because it looks like he goes into some details with respect to what happened during the season. And hopefully there isn't a whole lot of spoilers that you're about to get to in this next part of the email, because that is a show that I do want to watch at some point. But here, let's get to the crux of why you sent it. John says, before I get into this link, I want to mention, or I should mention rather, that LS Mark is a YouTuber that I'm often divisive on. For one thing, I'm kind of tired of the gimmick of YouTubers representing themselves as cartoon characters, like the aforementioned From Tusk Till Dawn, I mentioned a few episodes ago, is an anthropomorphic giraffe. Mysterious Mr. Enter started off as a Deep Throat parody and then just made himself a cartoon. Kitty Monk is a white anthropomorphic cat in monk clothes, and countless others. His cartoon of himself makes him look like a rejected 90s Sega game. Clearly, there's a lot of YouTube that I've never watched as far as these channels are concerned, because I've never heard of any of this nonsense. But either way, he says, so now what's the deal with the link? 1. LS Mark gave a good, compelling argument as to what worked for the show and what didn't. The Orville we're talking about here. For people who don't know, the Orville is Seth MacFarlane's love letter. That's how I put it. His love letter to Star Trek The Next Generation. It's not Star Trek. I don't care what any Star Trek purist wants to tell you. It is not Star Trek whatsoever. It is a Star Trek parody, homage, etc. that really is just riffing off of TNG. Right, the 7 seasons of TNG from 1987 to 1994. It most closely resembles that with respect to any other Star Trek series whatsoever. And I can tell you that just from watching the first 4 episodes. And that's really all of it that I've watched. I liked the show. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate what the show was doing or where it was headed. It just wasn't Star Trek. And it wasn't like that high on my radar. And they switched off from Fox to Hulu at some point. And I would like to revisit it. I'd like to revisit it and check it out fully. But yeah, that's what it is, truthfully, for people who don't know what it is. But John says, I think you've mentioned the Orville on this show at least once. I don't remember your opinion on it or if you've watched much of it. Honestly, subjectively speaking, it's not a bad show to me, but I don't think Seth can really do Sirius that well. It definitely makes me appreciate TNG episodes they're ripping off more. It is a very hit and miss. At best, they can make an entertaining show. At worst, it's McFarlane when he's at his worst. But man, maybe instead of ripping off or paying homage to TNG, perhaps taking inspiration from another pastiche of Star Trek, Galaxy Quest. Oh, okay, that's intriguing. He says making the Orville a flat out comedy would have made the show better. I love Galaxy Quest. It's closer to understanding Trek than the Orville did. I could easily see Seth Ed playing a Tim Allen type character. Kelly could be what Sigourney Weaver did. Making it share the same tone as a Trek show and playing it straight, I think, is what turned me off. Don't get me wrong, he says. Being like Galaxy Quest doesn't mean it always has to be funny. It just means better material for a guy in his own wheelhouse. McFarlane can deliver funny stuff when he tries. He can do serious scenes when he tries. Quest had some serious moments. In fact, I thought that's what it was going to be when I started seeing marketing pop out. Any thoughts? Yeah, I got a couple of thoughts on that. First, I don't want to make it seem like Seth MacFarlane or anybody comedic can't do serious stuff because, quite honestly, comedic actors and comedic creatives, they're the ones that can do serious even better than the dramatics, to be honest with you. And we kind of just saw that, truthfully, in Peacemaker season 2, right? For all the stuff that people have been arguing back and forth about, there were a lot of heavy emotional dramatic moments, way more so in season 2 than there was in season 1. And that's James Gunn is most certainly a comedic writer, but he absolutely understands how to tug at the heartstrings and really get some emotional complexity out of his characters. So I don't want to make it seem like Seth MacFarlane can't do that in that regard. By the same token, with Galaxy Quest, the tough part about adapting that as the idea, John, is that Galaxy Quest breaks the fourth wall. And what I mean by that is the point of Galaxy Quest is that they were actors on a Star Trek type TV series that were suddenly confronted with it being real and had to play out their personalities in reality and get through a tough situation with actual aliens while understanding that they were really just actors at the end of the day. And so that allowed them to do all the jokes and make all the self-referential humor, like does the rolling help? Or, having 1 second left on the clock, to get out of the jam and all that stuff. Like, they were able to really harp on the tropes of Star Trek because they broke the fourth wall within the movie. And I love that movie too. Okay, I have the collector's edition steelbook of that film. And yes, I would agree that it is more Star Trek than the Orville. In fact, the creators of Star Trek Fleet Command, pardon me, which is the online game, the mobile game that I've been playing for the last number of years, actually incorporated the Orville elements of the Orville and the cast, the actual crew members of it into the game, right? So literally I have an NSEA protector in my fleet and I can, I have Jason Nesmith as a captain. I have Alexander Dane because they go by the actual actor names, right? Not the names of their characters, not Peter Quincy Taggart or, I forget what was the name of I can't remember the name of Alexander Dane's character in the show, the alien character that was obviously supposed to be Mr. Dr. Lazarus. That's what it was. That's right. His name was Dr. Lazarus. Yeah. But they've got that character and they got Sigourney Weaver's character in there, right? So even Scopely, the company that owns Star Trek Fleet Command, even they acknowledge Galaxy Quest as being way more like Star Trek than the Orville. I don't expect to see any Orville additions into this game at any point in time. Maybe they will. I don't know. But I kind of doubt it, truthfully. Because Galaxy Quest, who did Galaxy Quest? Was that also Paramount? Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Hang on. I got to find out just real quick who did that. But that's the difficulty in trying to adapt a show like that, because if he's willing to, nope, it was Universal, it was DreamWorks Universal, okay, not Paramount. But yeah, so that's why I don't know that would work with the Orville TV series, because he'd have to break the fourth wall in that regard. And I mean, he could have done that, but also I should point out that Galaxy Quest doesn't spoof TNG; it spoofs the original series. It absolutely spoofs the original series. It's more of a classic in that regard. Tim Allen's Jason Nesmith he's doing a William Shatner cosplay, essentially, and that's the point of his character, right? And just like Alan Rickman, may he rest in peace, he's doing a Mr. Spock. He's doing a Leonard Nimoy in that regard, right? That whole situation in terms of what his character is doing. And they even make fun of the red shirt thing, the engineering stuff, like all of that comes from the original series. So that's the tough part. Seth grew up in the era, like he's a Gen Xer. He grew up in the era of TNG. He didn't grow up in the era of the original series. He's familiar with the original series, but no, it's he's clearly from the school of TNG, and that's what the Orville is. That's how I consider it. A love letter to the next generation, and it's fine for what it is. At some point, I will revisit it. It's further down on the list, obviously, but yeah, I through the episodes that I have watched, which, like I said, I only watched the first 4 episodes of season one. The episodes that I did watch, I thought were cool. I also thought it was cool that they brought Penny Johnson Gerald into the cast because Penny Johnson Gerald wasn't a TNG alum, but she was a DS9 alum because she is Cassidy Yates in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and her character became far more important throughout the show as she progressed through it. And that was cool to have an actual Star Trek actor in the show. And maybe there were others, I don't know, as we get through it. But yeah, solid show, decent show. Not for everybody, and certainly not Star Trek, regardless of all the, and that's all of the people that use the phrase new Trek, all the pro clutchers that, want to act like the Orville is more Star Trek than Discovery or Lower Decks or anything like that. No, it's bullshit. The Orville is objectively not Star Trek. It is objectively a Star Trek homage slash parody. It is not Star Trek itself. It does not take place in the Star Trek universe. It is not Star Trek, regardless of what any fan wishes to tell you. So, too bad, so sad in that regard for them. Anyway. All right, so on to the second question for this first email. John says, I saw someone comment that they heard a rumor that Supergirl was going to be closer in tone to Man of Steel than Superman, and that he wasn't sure that was a good idea. I tried not to put much stock into what he meant by that, but my feelings on the matter, so what if it is? Why would you want it to be the same type of movie as last year's? It did make me realize something, though. What happens, though, if critics rip apart Supergirl and Clayface? My guess is not much. I think at best people will say Gunn's still trying to navigate the DCU, and they were valiant efforts to do DCU films without him, and at worst Snyder cultists and many others standing on their soapboxes declaring DC Studios is dead. But Tanya's director and Mike Flanagan have a pretty solid track record, so I'm pretty confident they're going to be good. What's your take? I lean towards that, to be honest with you. I haven't seen I, Tanya, and I also haven't seen any of Craig Gillespie's other films. There's a couple of others in there that I am interested in seeing. Here, let me just take a look real quick, because Cruella, that's right. I knew there was another one with a female lead that I was really interested in, and that's definitely one of them. Cruella and I, Tanya are probably the two Craig Gillespie movies that I would like to watch before seeing Supergirl. He's also known for Lars and the Real Girl and Fright Night among his filmography. He also did Million Dollar Arm, Finest Hours, and Dumb Money. I think that was the last film that he did back in 2023. So, yeah, he's got that track record. And of course, we know Mike Flanagan's track record as a writer and a director. I've seen one Mike Flanagan movie to this point, and that's Doctor Sleep. I love Doctor Sleep. Fantastic film. So, to me, I think the track record says that those films are going to be better than, perhaps people are expecting in that regard. But, as far as critics ripping it apart, I don't know. I mean, it depends on, they're going to be very different. I don't think it's going to be a case where they're looking for Supergirl to emulate Superman. And, what you were saying, what happens, why would you want it to be the same type of movie as last year's? I think that, fans, I think that fan that you were talking about, I think they were focusing more on the Man of Steel part and less on the part that it was going to be like, that it wasn't going to be like the Superman film. Because whenever you bring up Man of Steel, that's when the anti-Snyder cultists, that's when they start cringing, and the hair stands up on the back of their neck. Oh no, why would you reference a Snyder film? Oh my goodness, get that shit out of here. No. As far as Supergirl as a character, I think Supergirl has much more freedom to do things than Superman does. People clutch their pearls with Superman. We've seen this for decades, right? Whatever they do with Superman, whatever the interpretation is, it's always got to be done a particular way, or else it's been ruined. Supergirl is not held to that standard. She just isn't. And if that were the case, if she was, then the CW show wouldn't have, been what it was for 6 seasons, and there would have been more people against Sasha Calle's version in The Flash. But, consistently, it's one of those things where when people talk about the Flash movie, I consistently hear, but Sasha Calle was awesome. Supergirl was awesome. But the movie itself, right? Whatever, right? So I think there's way more freedom, and I think the vast majority of not just the general audience, but also fans are willing to accept a Supergirl film that is not like Superman. And in fact, they probably don't want it to be like Superman because Kara is a very different character. And she's already been portrayed as such at the tail end of the Superman film. So yeah, I don't foresee that it is going to, be under the same amount of scrutiny and under the same microscope as Superman. Like not at all. And the cultists are going to say whatever they say. The haters are going to say whatever they say. But it you can't help that. I don't think Supergirl and Clayface are going to have a whole lot of negativity behind them. If anything, the biggest thing that I think people will be looking at is they're going to be comparing them to the Marvel films, unfairly, and they're going to say, "Well, look at what Brand New Day did. Look what Avengers Doomsday did." Well, you're comparing Spider-Man and the Avengers to Supergirl and Clayface. That's not a fair comparison whatsoever, unless the unthinkable occurs and Supergirl and Supergirl and Clayface rather outgross Spider-Man Brand New Day and Avengers Doomsday. I don't think anybody is calling for that, and that would be a shock. That would be an absolute shock if that were to occur. But no, I think that really what we're looking at here is we're looking to see, okay, how does the general audience gravitate towards the different flavors of the DCU in addition to critical response? Like, how does word of mouth go for that? That's what we're really looking at. And I think that holding Supergirl to these other standards like Superman, no, I think that's few and far between. I think that person you were looking at was more being a Man of Steel hater than anything else regarding Supergirl in that regard. So yeah, I would leave that where it is, truthfully. All right, this third question. He says, this is a hard question to ask, but I must know your take on this because I do kind of feel bad about something I did as I'm typing this email and sometimes do in general. What is your take on killing insects? Do you find it wrong? I swatted a fly that was on my chest. For some people, killing an insect is self-defense, like a bee or a spider, but you know that term wouldn't hurt a fly, right? It's not that I want to hurt a fly or an ant or an insect. I just don't have the wherewithal to pull a Superman with a squirrel. I mean, even Mr. Miyagi contradicts himself with this. Tells an ex-Karate Kid, Julie, that it's wrong to kill living things, yet has no problem killing a fly with chopsticks around Daniel. Um, okay, this is a very interesting question. Well, interesting in the sense of I feel like is this that serious of a topic? Perhaps it is. I don't want to diminish how serious it is for you, John. For me, I look at it as if insects don't bother me, I don't bother them. But the second they come into my space, that's an issue because insects operate independently and you can't reason with an insect. You can't tell an insect, don't crawl into my food or fly onto my face or, don't bite me in that regard, right? Because flies bite and other insects most certainly bite. And, self defense, I think, is a case like all across the board with insects because they're operating the way they operate. We operate the way we operate. And it's not like I go out, like, it'd be different if I was like, I must hunt down every fly or hunt down every ant. And that's all I'm doing for the rest of my days. And I turn into Van Helsing for insects. No, I'm certainly not. If the beehive is in the woods far away from where I live, I don't give a shit, right? You know what I mean? But the second it's in my home, then that's a problem. And I actually experienced that many, many years ago. The very first apartment I had, there were a beehive was built. Like bees crawled into the wall paneling outside of my patio door and built a 8 foot long beehive in my wall. And for months, they were coming into my apartment through the air vents. And I foolishly lived with that. Like it multiple times they're like, "Do you want to be moved to another place?" And because I was young and stupid and, didn't realize, the power that I had as a consumer, I kept saying no because I didn't want to deal with the difficulty of moving all of my stuff out of the apartment. I should have said yes, and I should have had them move me to another unit. And if that ever happened again, I would most certainly do that. But no, what it turned into was I finally, like I said, hey, we got to do something. And they called exterminators and maintenance out and they cut out the paneling and found the 8 foot long honeycomb and smashed the hell out of it. And at that point, like, it wasn't a problem. They had to repair the wall later. But yeah, that was a case where bees were literally invading where I lived. And yeah, I to this day, I have no idea if I'm allergic to bees or not. I don't know because I have never, at least to my knowledge, ever been stung. I've come close to being stung. But yeah, I have no idea if I'm going to be Thomas J from My Girl or not. I don't want to find out. But yeah, I think with any insect, it's self-defense, truthfully. I mean, whether you want to or not, it's self-defense if they come into your realm, if they come into where you're at. Don't hunt them down and don't destroy their homes as long as they're not impacting your life. That's how I look at it, and that's how I've always looked at it, and that's how I will continue to look at it, to be honest with you. I don't think that's so hard of a question or so hard of an answer, to be honest with you. So, all right. Next one. He says, I was able to get an interview with the Beatles YouTube pundit, This Is Lars Land, and they have 6,000 subscribers, so they're a pretty big deal. We spoke for 2 hours about Help and Rubber Soul since it's their 60th anniversary. Full episode will be released Friday morning. I'll have it scheduled to release 11 p.m. Thursday Pacific time, pardon me, and 2 a.m. your time Friday morning, your time, so you'll have the chance to hear it as it premieres on my channel. I'm Grueler. I'll share the first 6 minutes with you on my drive. If any listeners are Beatle fans, it's a great episode of the John and Tam Gam, pronounced Jam, podcast, although Tammy couldn't make it this time. Fair enough. Congratulations on that. Good work on that, John. Cool. He says, update on my Green Ranger costume. I added more Velcro on the helmet so it can fit better. I made a holster out of duct tape. I wore a green t-shirt to wear underneath to expose my back less. And also, Tam got her Green Ranger pink costume, which I see that. All right. Fully updated. So, yeah, you guys are ready to roll as far as Power Ranger cosplay is concerned. All right. Thank you for the update on that as you proceed. Okay, so next up, let's see. If I'm wading through the emails here, let's go to the second batch of Flight Chat stuff. Here we go. Now, this was sent on Friday. Salvation is and isn't here, he says. All right. So statements, he starts off with the second email. He says, if Peacemaker 2 was a standalone ending to a show, it'd be a bit divisive. Maybe this ending is also divisive, but there's a clear plan in place that will probably pay off by Man of Tomorrow. Well, 2 years is better than 3, I suppose. Our friend compared it to what happened to Mike and Sully in Monsters, Inc. Something similar happened in an episode of Dragon Ball Z, too. I mean, the premise isn't really an original idea, but how it's executed makes people question what's going to happen next. Interesting, that seems to be the direction DC shows are going in now. Lots of fans aren't going to be patient with this. I will be, though. I got a lot of different things going on between now and 2027, he says. I mean, I'm getting sick of the GTA 6 jokes, but will we see, spoilers, Chris Smith free before GTA 6 comes out? I also know this Salvation planet was used to set up Final Crisis, but I don't think that's the direction here. Also, why is he still living in that hotel after Checkmate is founded? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Here's the thing. So the monsters in the Monsters University, or you said what happened to Mike and Sully in Monsters Inc. or Monsters University? Because, I mean, I don't know. Like, the Monsters University, that was the first thing that I thought of, because that ending, neither of them graduated from, spoilers for people who don't want to know the end of Monsters University. Mike and Sully didn't graduate from the university. They like worked their way up like as janitors and became scares like the realistic way, I guess you could say, like if you don't get a degree, like, and that's what I really liked about the ending of that particular movie was it had a very real, relatable ending in terms of people that wanted to get to a career and work their way up as opposed to not necessarily, coming right out the gate with a degree from higher education for respect of it. Nothing against degrees from institutions of higher learning and whatnot, but just I like the realism of how that movie ended. I don't quite remember or the ending of Monsters Inc. to compare it to it, but I think that, and I talked about this in Flightbox yesterday. I think that there are people that are assigning the homework problem to this, even though they complain they don't want a homework problem, and yet they're asking for one because they want a direct through line. And it's like, well, this is going to be a case where people are going to go into Man of Tomorrow, and the question is, will they be expected to have seen Peacemaker Season 2? And if they haven't, will there be enough of an explanation in Man of Tomorrow to explain what salvation is or how that goes down? And there should be. There most certainly should be. Like, if we're talking about not having a homework problem, then we should be in a scenario where James Gunn and company should be able to explain to the uninitiated audience that didn't see Peacemaker Season 2 exactly what salvation is and exactly what's going on with respect to Lex Luthor and his partnership with Rick Flag and all that, right? They should be able to do that, and hopefully they will. That's the hope here, as far as I'm concerned, in that regard. So to me, I mean, fans are going to be impatient. Fans are going to feel however they want, and fans can feel however they want. All I would like is that they take responsibility for their own emotions and not blame James Gunn for it, because it's not his fault. It's your own fault if you feel impatiently or underwhelmed by what happened. And I'm somebody that feels underwhelmed. I am. I was underwhelmed by that season finale, but I understood and respected the direction that he took it in, and I'm not blaming him for it. I'm not wagging my finger at him like, "Oh, I can't believe you did this, and now the DCU is in trouble because I don't know what you're going to do with it." No, I'm not feeling that way at all. So anybody arguing either side of that, no, not with that, because I know there are people that were underwhelmed, and then there are others who are like, I can't believe you were underwhelmed. Well, believe it, they were underwhelmed, and they're allowed to feel that way. So it goes both ways in that regard. But at any rate, as far as why he's living in that hotel after Checkmate is founded, I don't know. I mean, Checkmate was brand new at that point. They haven't done anything. There's been no cases. Like, it was maybe he didn't have time to move. Like, where's he going to move to? That's the thing. Like, I don't know what is he going to live in the Checkmate offices? I don't know. That to me, I feel like that's a minor, like, situation to explain with respect to that. That's nitpicking in my opinion. Like, whatever, he just didn't have time to move to another place from the moment that they had opened Checkmate. That's really not the point of it. But either way, I'm sure at some point we will find out what the situation with that is. But let's see. He also posted the link for part one of his podcast with Lars Land, where they talk about the 60th anniversaries of Help and Rubber Soul. Says part two will be out in a little over a week. He says also, Tammy and I are seeing our first NHL game on the 2nd, San Jose Sharks versus Detroit Red Wings. Ray, I don't know if you plan on watching that game, but I'm interested to see what happens. I'm going to root for my team, but I won't be sad if they lose because I want you to be happy. Well, don't do that, John. The reason I say don't do that is because in sports, sports is different, right? Like, sports is competitive. Now, I get it. You're not really that big into sports, so maybe you don't have the same competitive like advantage or some competitive juices, if you will, as a sports fan. But if you were a diehard fan of the San Jose Sharks, I would not root for you to win. I would not want your team to win. I would not be happy if your team won. I would not say I want you to be happy. That's not how it works as a sports fan. No, certainly not. I'm kind of going through something like that right now with Sam Freeman. Sam Freeman is a Mariners fan. I don't want the Mariners to win. I don't. Because the Mariners beat the Tigers in the American League Divisional Series, and some of their fans, not Sam, but some of their fans got real mouthy about the behavior of Tigers fans because we're kind of upset. Actually, we're quite displeased with management penny pinching and not doing enough to build a lineup or to get some more pitching depth behind Tarek Skubal. And they're probably not going to re-sign him, and he's probably going to end up pitching somewhere else, and we're going to lose our ace pitcher, and we're going to be right back where we started because our ownership group is too cheap to actually put a winner on the field and actually be competitive, if you will. So a lot of people didn't go to the playoff game last week, game 3 or 4, game 4 really, between the Mariners and the Tigers, and some Mariners fans decided to try and call us out, like saying we weren't half the fans that they were as a result of that. Well, first of all, Mariners fans that would even dare say that should keep their mouths shut because no one's cared about the Mariners for I don't know how long, and they go with this whole underdog mentality, like, oh, it's been so long. Yeah, it's been 42 years since the Tigers have won a World Series, so you're not really cutting any ice with me as far as it being 23 years since you were relevant in the playoffs or whatnot. No, it is what it is. Oh, it's a great feel-good story, whatever. But yeah, from a competitive standpoint, I am not rooting for the Mariners. I am rooting for the Blue Jays at this point because I don't root for teams that beat my teams in the playoffs. So that's where it goes with sports, I would say, John. So no, root for the Sharks. Absolutely root for the Sharks. The Wings are owned by the same owner that owns the Tigers. So a lot of the frustrations I have with the Tigers, I also have with the Wings. So it would not surprise me if the Wings lost that game. They got pummeled in the home opener against Montreal a couple of nights ago, but then they bounced back yesterday with a really nice win against Toronto. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm not sure where the Wings are going to be at this point. But yeah, that is a game that I would be curious to watch and may very well watch on FanDuel Sports Network. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. And of course, I'll be rooting for them, but it won't surprise me if they lose because the Wings just have not been that good for a long time, unfortunately. So, but no, root for the Sharks. Absolutely root for the Sharks. Never mind my happiness. Root for the Sharks, right? As far as your rooting interest in that regard, that is what I would say with respect to sports. Sports is very different than movies, TV, and other sort of media because there's actual competition in terms of wins and losses and whatnot, and rooting interest in that regard. It's when you try to apply all of that to movies and studios where it gets really stupid and silly. But for sports, it's sports is built for that. Sports is made for that. So that's what I would say with respect to that. And don't worry, if you decide to be like, if you get into sports and you decide to be like a diehard Sharks fan, or if you become a fan of one of the other original six teams that have had a rivalry with the Red Wings for literally 100 years, and I mean that literally because this is the 100-year anniversary of the Wings since they were in inception in 1926, and in the early days of the NHL for 40 years, first 40 seasons, there were only six teams in the NHL. There were the Red Wings, there were the Chicago Blackhawks, the Boston Bruins, the Montreal Canadiens, the New York Rangers, the Toronto Maple Leafs, did I say Montreal? I think I said, is that all of them? Here, I got to count again. Detroit, Montreal, New York, Boston, Chicago, Toronto. Yes, that's the original six, right? If you became a fan of any of those other original six teams, I would say, all right, cool. Hey, you know what? Uh, Rivalries. May the best team win. That's how it goes. That's literally how it goes, right? So the fact that I'm not rooting for the Mariners and that I would like them to crash and burn personally, but that's no reflection on Sam. That's no reflection on anybody that's like a peaceful Mariners fan. I'm just not rooting for them. That's how it goes in sports. It is what it is. So anyway, I say all of that. That's my long-winded way of saying root for the Sharks. It's okay. Perfectly okay. But here are your three questions for this second email. You said, what's the funniest sport gathering story you've ever heard? Funniest? Funniest sports gathering story I've ever heard? I don't know. Not sure what like funny. Funny how? Well, here's your example. You said 2013 Super Bowl. My supervisor picks me and the rest of the crew up for our shift and tells us as he's hosting the Har Bowl, his daughter with her boyfriend shows up and the boyfriend is in a Ravens jersey and my boss throws him out. Okay, that kind of story. All right, well, here. This is funny and yet also like gut wrenching, kind of it's my uncle told me this story. This was the Super Bowl in 2003. It was Oakland Raiders at the time, Oakland Raiders versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, what happened was Tampa Bay won that game in a blowout. And there were several reasons why they won the game in a blowout, not the least of which their current head coach at that time, the previous year, had been the head coach of the Oakland Raiders, and the Raiders didn't change anything about their offense. So Tampa Bay's defense knew everything that Oakland was going to do, and that's why they had 6 or 7 interceptions and won the game very convincingly. But here's the problem. The problem is that late in the fourth quarter of that game, the score was 41-21. And there was a gentleman in my uncle's football squares pool who had 1-1. And at that time, had the score remained 41-21 as a final, he would have won $3,200. And then, with like a minute or so left, Tampa Bay got one last interception that was returned for a touchdown and changed the score to 48-21. And he lost $3,200. And he didn't lose $3,200 where like he, had to pay $3,200. No, he was going to win $3,200 if the score had remained 41-21, and he lost that opportunity when it became 48-21 because of a meaningless touchdown that had absolutely no bearing on the ending of the game, the impact of the game whatsoever. Tampa Bay was going to win. Tampa Bay was up by 20. There was no need for them to score another late touchdown, and yet they did, and he got screwed out of the money. Now, in some cases that's hilarious. In other cases that's really like depressing and like, oh my goodness, my heart goes out to that guy, depending on, how nice of a person that guy was. But yeah, it's just like, oh, that is a sucks to be you situation. My goodness. So that's the closest I can think of as far as the funniest sports gathering story, which again is funny depending on who you are, right? Or depending on how dark of a sense of humor you have, I guess you could say, money wise in that regard. So second question, do you think Checkmate will have a prominent role in Man of Tomorrow? I don't know. I'm unwilling to say that it will have a prominent role because then that means that you're bringing in characters from Peacemaker that are now part of Checkmate into the show and into the movie rather, and that could happen. Hey, we could see Harcourt, we could see Adebayo, we could see those people in Man of Tomorrow. I don't know, right? It really depends more on how much it involves Lex and what goes on, because I think the presumption that a lot of us, the speculation that a lot of us are having, is that it's not going to be so much about Checkmate. It's going to be more about whatever threat is on Salvation that Superman and Lex are probably going to have to team up to deal with. And I've already seen somebody speculate that Brainiac has control of that world already and that he's going to be the problem that's going to emerge, right? Because again, the warning that was levied at Rick Flag Sr. is that you're not going to be able to control the situation. And right now he thinks that Salvation is a controllable asset, and he's probably wrong. He's probably very wrong. And so he's going to come into conflict with Superman not only because of his metahuman prison stance, but also because of whatever emerges from Salvation that is now going to cause a major issue, more than likely in Man of Tomorrow with the Earth, right? With Metropolis, something to that effect in that regard, which is probably what's going to prompt the team up between him and Lex to deal with that scenario in the midst of the whole metahuman prison situation, right? So I don't know how much Checkmate is going to be involved in that, but we'll see. Wouldn't surprise me if we see those characters appear at some point, synergistically in that regard. And maybe they're the ones that will explain that will give the general audience the explanation, if they didn't watch Peacemaker season 2. Maybe that's what their presence will be in Man of Tomorrow, is to give the audience a primer. Hey, what you didn't watch in the show was this, yada yada yada, da 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 da. And if that's cool, if that's what they do, cool, great. I have no issues with that whatsoever. It seems to me that we're learning very quickly that James Gunn does not do gratuitous cameos. All of his cameos and all of his appearances have a point and a reason with respect to the story, which is great. It's fantastic. I have no issues with that whatsoever. And you know what? Like I said on Flightbox, essentially to sum up my thoughts on his hype and his plans, whatnot, for the future of the DCU as far as hyping things up. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I now know how he operates. I now know what he does. I now know what he's going to do. And so now I'm not going to allow my fandom imagination to get the better of me. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to proceed, as he has proceeded so far with respect to this. That's how I'm going to be with it. So yeah, that's where I sit with this, honestly, at the moment, John, truthfully. Third question for the second email, which is arguably the most important question he asks. He says, next time I go to Galaxy's Edge, I will build the more expensive versions of the lightsaber, and it will be green. Do you have a favorite color saber? Purple. Purple. I want a Mace Windu purple blade. Yes, absolutely. When, not if, but when I go to Galaxy's Edge, probably the one in California more than the one in Florida, because I figure the one in California is not a plague enthusiast state. Florida kind of is at this point in time. They don't believe in science or vaccines down there. But either way, when I go to Galaxy's Edge, probably at Disneyland, yeah, I'm purple. I want a purple bladed lightsaber, and I will build my own hilt, and I will have my own purple lightsaber. Yes, that is the favorite color that I most certainly have. If not purple, then I would probably definitely go with blue at that point after that, right? Because I am a Jedi at heart. I know plenty of friends of mine that are Sith at heart and would want red or orange or yellow, I suppose. Yellow, I guess, kind of goes either way. But you can also do white now. Ahsoka, I think, and I don't know if they have white, but Ahsoka's kind of made white popular with her sabers as well. So, but yeah, purple. Purple is absolutely my answer, my final answer on that one. So let's see. Here we go. How about this? There was this extra email that called extra flight chat thing that John R. sent. He says, didn't Mr. Terrific say he puts nanotechnology in everybody? Literally everybody? Does that include Chris? Or did they learn that from their mistake with Soups? Perhaps the Justice Gang could simply ignore this, but they did offer him a spot on the team, so who knows? I just don't know if it would take that long to find him. But he wasn't there, though, John. Like, that interview with Peacemaker, he was literally the only one that wasn't there. Guy was there, and Hawkgirl was there, and Max Lord was there. Mr. Terrific was not there. I don't know where he was, but that's your explanation. Like, he was not there to put nano trackers in Peacemaker at that point in time for whatever reason. So, yeah, I think that's easily explained in that regard. So, no, he did not have an opportunity as of yet to put nano trackers in him. And maybe that will happen after Men of Tomorrow. I don't know. Probably not. But yeah, that's my explanation. Is Mr. Terrific was not there to do that. So nope, could not find him. And even so, are they going to go? So what would you? The thought process would be that Harcourt and everybody else out of bio would have gone and found Mr. Terrific to help him track him. I mean, that could have been. Maybe that was an earlier draft of what they were going to do, and they just didn't make it work. Either way, but yeah, that's. And he wanted to go the comedic route with it, and I didn't really care for the Economist thing either, like the whole, because Economist is like kind of my least favorite member of the 11th Street Kids personally. Just and it's not the actor. I'm fine with Steve Agee. It's just the character itself is really annoying, and I don't really care for that character at all. I haven't necessarily cared for him the entire way through, but that's my own subjective opinion with respect to that. It's not like he's a deal breaker or anything like that for me, but that's where I think the direction they decided to take with that particular aspect of the story in terms of locating where Chris was. So yeah, that's what I would say to that. I think that's all of John's emails this week. All right. Awesome. Thank you as always for the feedback, John. Indeed, greatly appreciated. All right, next up, let's check in on Amari Daniels, who has not emailed in a while, but of course has been a long time listener. I think, again, going all the way back to the Fans Without Borders days. Welcome back, Amari, with an email titled Making a List of My Own. Oh, intriguing. He says, Ray, hope your October is going great so far. I wanted to ask about your list that you've talked about as far back as Fans Without Borders. How is it going? Are you making much progress? And are there things on your list that you look forward to watching? Not great because I have massive time management issues and there's a lot of shit for me to watch. I wish I could give you a better update, but no. There's a whole lot that I still need to watch that I just have not been able to find a proper work-life balance to be able to watch. I keep hoping that I can just, get off my ass and finally work through a lot of it. It's tough on weekdays. It's tough with my work schedule to do that, to be honest with you. But I hopefully in the not too distant future, I can give you a better update on that. I'm sure you have progressed much further than I have because you said I ask because for almost 2 years now, I've been working on a list of my own. In October 2023, I told myself that if I ever wanted to watch movies that I hadn't seen before, the only thing stopping me was myself. So one Friday night, I thought I would start watching movies I hadn't seen before, starting with The Wolf of Wall Street. Ooh, that's a good one. It's fantastic. Then I saw the movie's runtime, he says, and decided that a Saturday morning would be better. Yep, I agree. That movie's nearly 3, if not over 3 hours long, but worth it. Absolutely worth it. One of my favorite Scorsese movies. A few days later, he says, a coworker recommended the 1972 comedy What's Up, Doc with Barbara Streisand. From there, the race was on. Besides certain months, there's no real thought process to what films I pick. It just helps that HBO Max has such an extensive collection. Some are random, some are recommendations from friends. Including this week, he says, for the past 105 weeks, I've made a point to take time and watch one film that I've never seen before. It's been quite a journey. For February, I finally got to watch films like Shaft, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and Half Baked. Some films surprised me with how much I enjoyed them, like Singin' in the Rain, The Boondock Saints, or the first 3 Mad Max films. Some movies I ended up watching are the perfect opportunity. When Shelley Duvall passed, for example, I took that as an excuse to finally watch The Shining, as I had a Blu-ray steelbook that had just been sitting anyway. When Drive My Car was about to leave HBO Max, I took the opportunity to watch it one week and add it to my list. Some films left me baffled, he said, like Eraserhead, and some films absolutely left me stunned and wondering how I had not seen them before, like Leaving Las Vegas and the Muppets movie from 1979, and I have no problem admitting that when I watched It's a Wonderful Life for the first time, the ending moved me to tears. I also made a point, he said, of watching noteworthy films when I reached certain weeks. For week 50, I finally tackled 2001 A Space Odyssey, and just a few weeks ago for week 100, I took on the behemoth that is Gone with the Wind. Oh, yeah, 4 hours, or nearly 4 hours, close to that, if I'm not mistaken. Film as a medium has existed for so long, he says. I've only watched one silent film and a number of foreign films, so I haven't even come close to scratching the surface. The point is, it's been a fun journey. Every week I have something to look forward to, like going on a new adventure each week. In fact, at the time of sending this email on October 7th, I just finished watching the 1990 film Misery with James Caan and Kathy Bates. It's October, so I figured I'd watch some horror films. But that's where I am. I don't see this stopping anytime soon. There are so many movies, and all it takes is just a bit of time for myself to sit down and jump into a new journey for a few hours. I'm excited to see where this journey takes me each week, and I'm curious to see what you're hoping to watch next on your list. Best, Omari. Well, Omari, thank you for the email and thank you for the update on your progress. You have made far more progress than I have, but I will say this. I'll go ahead and bring this up here on Sunday, October 12th. This is the time of me recording this. I hear you in terms of the idea of having like themed months. An idea popped into my head yesterday. And I'm good for coming up with ideas. My problem is never coming up with ideas. My problem is executing and finishing those ideas. Well, one popped up into my head yesterday that I think is an awesome idea, and it coincides with a movie that is actually on the way. This is a movie that I pre-ordered months ago, and it's a difficult one to find right now as far as steelbooks. It came out this year. It's a film that came out this year, a steelbook film, a film in steelbook form, and all the biggest hint that I will give anybody here is that it's a Robert Eggers movie. I've never seen a Robert Eggers movie. Like, I've heard many things about Robert Eggers as a director, but I have never actually sat down and watched a Robert Eggers movie. Now, to that end, I will point this out, and this may give it away for people who like haven't seen Robert Eggers films or have seen Robert Eggers films and maybe know which ones may have released this year. But here's everything. Robert Eggers has a very short like filmography. He's my age. He's 42. In fact, he's younger than me by about 6 months or so because he was born in 83 instead of 82. But here's Robert Eggers' filmography as a director. He's done The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and Nosferatu. And he's also working on a fifth film right now called Werewolf. Now, one of these movies is on the way to my location now because I pre ordered it months ago and I was just notified a week or so ago that it was shipping and I had to get it overseas. It was one of those special editions that didn't come from, they don't release limited special editions of Steelbooks a whole lot in the United States. It was a special edition release that I had to buy from the UK. They have shipped it. It passed customs a couple of days ago, and it's on its way here. In fact, it'll probably be in my hand either tomorrow, Monday, or the day after that on Tuesday. And it's a movie that absolutely fits October. It's one of the four that I listed: The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, or Nosferatu. One of those movies is going to be in my hand in special edition very soon. And once I do, I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to do a flight review episode. I'm going to do a flight review episode probably on Patreon, more than likely, Amari. And I shall review this Robert Eggers film. It will be the first Robert Eggers film because I thought about this. I was like, okay, do I try and watch all four of them in order of release? Because I am interested in all four of them. I'm interested in The Witch, I'm interested in The Lighthouse, I'm interested in Northman, and I'm interested in Nosferatu. I'm interested in all of them, and I would like to see what all is cracked up to be with Robert Eggers as a director because I've heard many great praiseworthy things about him as a director. He has been critically acclaimed by people that I know and by others in the social media scapes and whatnot, right? So yeah, do I watch them in order or do I just watch whichever one, like I come into contact with first? And so yeah, that depends on whatever one is on the way to my location now. That will be the one that I watch. And then I will give my thoughts on it and then I will watch the others. But yeah, following directors, and I feel like perhaps that might be a good way to go as far as following directors or following themes. October is a great time, obviously, to watch scary movies and spooky movies. Alex De Silva has been doing that. He's had his Scarathon. He's given us some updates with respect to the movies he's been watching for Halloween season this month already. And I like that idea. So, yeah, that's where I'm sitting at right now with respect to movies that I watched. Yeah, and I did mention a couple weeks ago, a month ago, it's amazing that this was a month ago, that we flew out to San Francisco for my sister's wedding. I watched three movies on the flight there and on the way back. I watched Iron Giant for the first time on the way there, and I reviewed that for Patreon. And then on the way back, I watched Black Bag and Mickey 17. I still need to review those. So that's just a question to me. I've watched the movies. I need to sit down and actually record my thoughts and talk about either one of them for a second, right? What I thought about each of them in that regard. Because I own it. Kind of a spoiler in terms of whether or not I enjoyed them is I own both of those movies now. I own Mickey 17 in 4K steelbook form, and I own Black Bag in 4K slipcase form because they haven't done like a steelbook release of anything like that for it. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. Spooky season. But I have a name for it. I have a title for it, and I'm going to unveil that here this week. But yeah, when this Robert Eggers movie for spooky season arrives, I shall watch it, I shall review it, and I shall post that review to the Flightcast Patreon, and hopefully that will kickstart some other spooky season movies that I've been meaning to watch for a while, truthfully, that I would like to watch for this spooky season. I know we're nearly halfway through October already, but remember, October has 31 days. So we've still got 3 full weeks before we get to Halloween in that regard. So yeah, here's hoping. And then, of course, Beetlejuice. I mean, of course, I have to do my annual watch of Beetlejuice. I love that. Love that film. My favorite ghost film of all time. But thank you for sharing your updates, Amari, and thank you for the inspiration, if you will. Keep on trucking, man, and keep on enjoying, getting through all the movies. A number of those movies that you listed, I do want to say, aside from Wolf of Wall Street, I have seen. Like, I've seen that, and I own Wolf of Wall Street. I've seen Shaft and I own Shaft and I also own the sequel Shaft's Big Score because you get both if you have the 4K Criterion collection of that particular film. I've seen the Boondock Saints. I enjoyed that film. I own The Shining. I actually own The Shining a couple of times, truthfully. I have a few. I have a special edition version of that in addition to a Walmart steelbook that is difficult to find. I also have 2001: A Space Odyssey. I have the Film Vault version, the Film Vault steelbook of that particular film. That's my goodness, what an unbelievable film from Mr. Kubrick that is, indeed. But a number of the other ones you listed, I have not seen. Like I've never seen Gone with the Wind. I've never seen Misery. I have seen It's a Wonderful Life. Long movie. Real long movie. But no, I hear you on that ending. I feel you on how emotional that ending is, most certainly, especially with respect to the rest of the film. But yeah, either way, best of luck to you, man. Congratulations on progressing as far as you have. And yeah, we'll see how it goes with respect to both of our respective lists. I got a lot to catch up on. You are definitely ahead of me in that department, good sir. And I salute you with that. I look forward to hearing what other movies you have watched in your stead going forward, for sure. All right, next up, let's check in with Amr Osama. It's been a few weeks since he's given us an email, a missive, if you will, updating, among many things, his Star Trek watch updates. Because remember, last we checked with him, he was in the middle of progressing through Star Trek TNG Season 7 and DS9 Season 2. Because remember, he's already gotten past Season 1. He's been motoring through Star Trek. Most certainly he has. Let's see how much further he's gotten. This email is titled Peacemaker, What a Goat. And Star Trek TNG and DS9 Plus redacted. Redacted. Oh boy. Okay. This this is intriguing because Amr writes longer emails, Dorsey-sized emails, if you will. In fact, he might be rifling Anthony Dorsey's emails as far as length at this point in time. I don't know what this redacted is, and the Gemini is not giving me a summary of what it is. So this will be intriguing. Buckle up. Here we go. He says, "Hey Ray, it's been quite a while since my last email, about a month actually. The reason for my long absence from Flight Chat updates is that I just haven't been feeling like myself lately. Life's gotten in the way, and a lot of personal issues have been keeping me from engaging with much of anything. I don't want to get too personal, but last Monday, October 6th, was my birthday. I turned 22. I'm supposed to be in college right now, but I haven't been since 2022 due to some financial struggles my family's been dealing with. Thankfully, things have been looking up lately, and maybe next academic year will finally be the one where I can return. I try to act like it doesn't bother me," he says, "but honestly, seeing close friends move forward with their lives has been getting to me more than I'd like to admit. As you know, I'm Muslim, and I was raised to believe that trials and tribulations are simply a part of life's journey. Whatever hardships or calamities we face are, in the end, tests meant to strengthen us. I hold firmly to that belief, but over time I've also learned that it's okay to feel upset about what we're going through, that there's nothing wrong with acknowledging our pain, even as we trust in God's plan. Moments like these can help a person grow stronger," he says. "And despite the incredibly difficult times my family and I have been through, we've come to realize that they may have strengthened us in ways we didn't expect. These past few years have been especially tough on me," he says. "I'm technically away from my family. Though I'm from Egypt, I haven't lived here all my life. I was actually born in Saudi Arabia and spent 18 years there, only visiting Egypt occasionally during the summers. In 2021, I moved to Egypt to begin my higher education journey, while my parents remained in Saudi Arabia for work. They used to visit whenever they could, but with the financial difficulties I mentioned earlier, that's become harder and harder. So for now, I'm here on my own, doing my best to navigate the situation as it is. And now, with the start of the new academic year here in Egypt," he says, "and as I mentioned before, seeing everyone move forward while I'm still in the same place has been difficult. There's no easy way to describe it, but the reality of my situation does take a toll on me at times. I keep reminding myself to stay patient and hopeful, yet it's hard not to feel the weight of it all." So there you have it. In short, I just haven't been in the right mood lately. All right. Well, first of all, Amr, it's completely understandable. No apologies or anything like that is necessary, even though I know you kind of do so in the next paragraph here. But listen, if it helps you out at all, I will tell you this. With respect to college and like higher learning and whatnot, I've been telling people this for years, back when I was a traditional undergrad, and certainly as I got older, because I had classmates, when I went to school, that were saying the exact same thing, in terms of they thought that, things were going to go faster and that it would only take 4 years. And, it's taking, they would these are people that would freak out if they got anything less than an A on any of the stuff because they were used to being like, high honors and, dean's list or not dean's list, but like principal's list and all that and high honors and 4.0 and 5.0 if they were AP and stuff like that, right? Then they get to college and it's much more difficult. And I told them, I said, listen, college and higher education is a marathon, not a sprint. It does not matter when you cross that finish line. All that matters is that you cross it. That's all. And it doesn't matter how many years it takes. Like your trajectory has nothing to do with anybody else's and vice versa, right? So, all of your friends, and I can tell you this from personal experience because I have plenty of friends. I'm 42 and, Lord willing, I'll be 43 this Christmas. And I still do not have a college degree. I don't. I've taken plenty of college. I'm, credits away from a degree, my bachelor's degree, right? Not master's or doctorate or anything like that. I am credits away from my bachelor's degree in communications, if you will, at my institution of higher learning, as well as credits away from 2 associate's degrees at a different school, right, where I studied film and TV and whatnot, right? And yet, even though I don't have that degree, I've been working in TV for 12 years. Like 12 years and counting in that regard, which was not my, intent, but that's totally where my life went. And I know friends of mine, people that I went to school with, high school back in the day, that did the whole college thing through 4 years, whatnot, and they ended up having to change vocations because there weren't any jobs in their field that they studied when they got out of school, and they went through their own struggles. And just because their life looks put together on Facebook and social media does not mean that they don't have their own trials and tribulations and struggles, and they all do. They all do. Every last one of them have been in some type of shit, right? Everybody struggles. Like that is absolutely a part of life. And we, as difficult as it might be, judging our lives based on others, don't do that. Absolutely. Do your best not to do that. I know it's tough. I know it's tough, especially in your early 20s. I get it. Everybody is moving at a faster pace than you are, but you got to focus on your own journey. Your journey is not going to be the same as theirs, nor should it be. You shouldn't be doing exactly the same thing that they're doing. They shouldn't be doing exactly the same thing that you're doing. All that matters is that you cross that finish line. Doesn't matter when you cross that finish line, just cross it at some point, right? Finish what you started later on. I'm going to finish what I started, but it's funny that I'm in a position now in life where I don't necessarily need to because of where my career has taken me, because of the experience that I've gained. And there's different ways to do that, right? Like there's different ways to go about how this all shakes out in terms of our career and in terms of our progression. So don't get down on yourself. Don't feel like things are passing you by. You're going at your own pace. You're going at the pace that you need to be going to, and that will work out for you as long as you keep moving, as long as you keep trying, as long as you keep doing what you need to do. Don't worry about timeline. Don't worry about time frame, right? Because it's a marathon. Life itself is a marathon, not a sprint, right? Doesn't matter how or when you cross the finish line. It just matters that you cross it, right? To victory in that regard. So hang in there, man. You're good. I guarantee whatever you're doing, you're all good. You got a good head on your shoulders based on everything that you said. And yeah, you do have to remind yourself to stay patient and hopeful. And yes, it can feel very heavy in your 20s. I promise you, you keep an open mind and try to stay as respectful of yourself and your time as you possibly can. And by the time you get to your 30s and 40s, that weight is going to go away because you're going to see and you're going to learn what is more valuable to you in life than other things, and it's going to change. It is. I believe it will change for you by the time you get older in that regard. God willing, of course, in that regard. But no, I hear you. I understand, man, and that's hey, you got to take a break. You got to take a break. You don't feel like yourself. You don't feel like yourself. Like that's what all of us need to understand is that mental health breaks are necessary for everyone. Like on this planet. I mean, certainly in the country I live in. United States, we all need mental health help. All of us. Every last one of us. Seriously, for a variety of reasons. So, and different levels of that, depending on where we're at, who we are, and what we're doing, in that regard. So, yeah, no shame. Absolutely no shame, Amr. Appreciate it. All right. So, yeah, the next paragraph. He said, well, moving on, apologies for the somber mood I began the email with. Nope, no worries, not somber at all. It's growing pains, man. I get it. He says, I genuinely hope you're doing well and in good spirits, Ray. The same goes for everyone tuning in. I've got to say, despite everything, I've really missed you guys. As I'm writing this, I just finished catching up on weeks worth of previous Flight Chat episodes. There are still the Flightbox episodes to dive into. Maybe I'll binge them after you drop your Peacemaker finale Flightbox episode, which I did. So he must have sent this email before I posted it because I posted it yesterday. But he says the Peacemaker Season 2 finale dropped, and I have thoughts about this season as a whole, especially since I haven't given any updates since I think the second or third episode. And as for Star Trek, yeah, there are updates for both TNG and DS9 in this email too. This might end up being Dorsey-sized, I'm not sure. So here we go. Starting with Peacemaker. Peacemaker Season 2 just ended recently with the release of the season finale, Episode 8, Full Nelson. Or could this even serve as a series finale, he says. Overall, I like this season. I'll admit my expectations were quite high. I didn't expect it to take the direction it did, but I'm genuinely happy with the final product. Many viewers probably went in expecting something similar to Season 1, and don't get me wrong, this season still has everything that made the first season great, but looking at how it ended, it's clear this season focused on one big thing and one smaller thing. The big thing is that this season serves as a deep character study, not only on Christopher Smith, aka Peacemaker, but also on the 11th Street Kids. Amelia Harcourt, Leota Adebayo, John Economos, and Adrian Chase. The development among them goes roughly in that order. Chris naturally has the most focus since the show is named after him, but Amelia and Leota also get significant attention and growth. Thinking back, he says, I should have expected the finale we got based on how the first 3 episodes were paced. The first 2 episodes handled a lot of setup, and episode 3 wrapped that up while showing the direction of the season. It's in this episode that Chris finally travels into an alternate dimension where both his father and brother are alive. And his father surprisingly appears to be a completely different person. Non-toxic, non-racist, non-misogynistic, and none of the awful traits that we saw in the Earth 1 Augie Smith from Season 1. On the surface, it seems like the perfect universe, everything Chris ever wanted. When I first watched the episode, he says, I didn't notice what many viewers immediately pointed out. There were no people of color in that alternate universe. That strange omission later becomes clear when we find out that this alternate world is actually Earth X, a universe where the Nazis won World War II. Once that reveal hit in episode 6, it raised new questions. Why was this why Augie Smith rather seemed happy here? Was it because this version of reality aligned with the ideology we knew defined the original Augie? Initially, it would make sense to assume so, but the twist is that Earth X Augie isn't a Nazi at all. Ever since the Earth X concept was revealed, he says, I think a lot of people overestimated how it would be used. Many probably expected something on the scale of the Arrowverse's Crisis on Earth X, but with how the story unfolded, it's clear James Gunn never intended this to be a massive DCU event. Instead, it was a vessel for Peacemaker's character development, a lens through which to explore his trauma, identity, and sense of morality. In a previous Flight Chat episode, Amr says it was mentioned that not noticing the absence of people of color in that alternate universe might reflect a kind of privilege. I agree, and I'll admit, I was one of the people who didn't clock it until it was pointed out online. Maybe that's privilege, or maybe it's a product of where and how I was raised. Racism and discrimination exist everywhere, of course, but perhaps not as visibly or as deeply entrenched as they are in the United States. Yeah, I would agree with that as well, Amr. He says the smaller thing this season did set up was future storylines for the DCU. The final episode shows the foundation of Checkmate, an agency created by the 11th Street Kids, joined by Sacha Bordeaux and Langston Fleury. We also learn about Planet Salvation, a concept from the comics, a planet built to imprison metahumans. James Gunn has confirmed that events from this season directly tie into Man of Tomorrow and will also influence Creature Commandos Season 2 and the upcoming Lanterns TV series. I'm genuinely intrigued by this setup and can't wait to see how it unfolds. We should also point out that Judo Master also joined, Rip Jagger, he also joined Checkmate. He is also a part of that as well. He left Argus and did that too. He says the absolute highlight of the season, though, is the performances. John Cena and Jennifer Holland bring their absolute best this season. Cena in particular continues to surprise me. He already impressed in season 1, but here he's even better, completely shedding his wrestler persona and showing incredible emotional depth. One moment that stands out comes in episode 7 where he screams "Stop" to prevent everyone from hurting or potentially killing alternate universe Keith, his brother. It's a raw, heartbreaking moment, like the broken child inside Christopher finally breaking through. Yes, the caterwaul. We definitely talk about that in Flightbox for sure, Amr. Danielle Brooks, who plays Leota, also shines this season, especially in a touching and emotional scene in the finale with Elizabeth Faith Ludlow, who plays her ex-fiancée Kia. Another standout moment from episode 7 is the reveal that Earth X Augie is not a Nazi. Unlike his Earth 1 counterpart, this was the biggest surprise for me because the writing cleverly made it seem like this version would be just as bad. It's a smart subversion of expectations. Earth X Augie might not be a Nazi, but his kids definitely seem to carry that ideology instead. It's a brilliant inversion. On Earth 1, Chris and Keith as kids resisted their father's worldview. On Earth X, they embrace it while their father rejects it. This theme of oppositeness runs throughout the alternate universe. Even Earth X Vigilante despises his Peacemaker, unlike the adoration seen between their Earth 1 versions. But that oppositeness only goes so far before it becomes something far more chilling. The moment Leota said she was going to go for a walk in this alternate universe, I immediately braced myself. This was before the show outright confirmed that the world was Nazi infested, but theories were already swirling online, and oh my god, the tension was unbearable. Leota innocently waves at a passing vehicle only to be met with a look of shock, confusion, and fear from the driver. At first I thought maybe that person was just uptight, he says. But then more people begin to stare, each with that same expression of disbelief and disgust. Then Keith drives by, slams on the brakes, gets out of his car, and utters one of the most diabolical lines I've ever heard on television. One got out, a black. Holy shit, that moment was genuinely shocking to me, and I can't imagine what it must have felt like for you, Ray, or for any person of color watching it, he says. It's one of those scenes that made me laugh, but not because it was funny. It absolutely wasn't. It was that nervous kind of laughter that comes from pure fear or shock when your brain doesn't know how else to process what it's seeing. Yeah, we talked about that again. A lot of what you're saying, Amr, we definitely covered in Flightbox. I can put it to you that way. So my full thoughts with respect to all of this is definitely in Flightbox. Especially me being in fan brain mode and really also, like you said, kind of expecting Crisis on Earth X levels of like massiveness with this that we really did not get, and that because that was never the intention from James Gunn. But yeah, I'm with you on it. He says, I say the oppositeness stops here because this is where the season's clever mirror dynamic becomes horrifyingly real. Thankfully, Leota is saved by Judo Master shortly after, and the two share a beautifully written conversation in which Leota reflects the sad thing is this world may not be entirely different from others. James Gunn mentioned in the After Show podcast that he personally spoke with Danielle Brooks about this scene to make sure she was comfortable with it. And I think that level of thoughtfulness says a lot about his approach to storytelling and respect for his actors. And speaking of opposites, he says, we have Rick Flag Sr. I'll try to avoid Creature Commando spoilers here, but his inclusion in this season perfectly mirrors that show's emotional beats. Gunn once made us hate Peacemaker in the Suicide Squad before making us love him in Peacemaker, and here he does the reverse with Flag Sr. We grew to like him in Creature Commandos only to absolutely despise him here. It's another brilliant play on contrast. In the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker kills Flag's son, Rick Flag Jr., which leaves Flag Sr. driven entirely by revenge. You might expect a redemption arc, a story where he realizes vengeance isn't the answer, that his son wouldn't have wanted this, that the anger is destroying him. But no, Flag doubles down on villainy. He becomes desperate and unhinged, even making a deal with an imprisoned Lex Luthor. By the end of the season, he's undergone a full 180-degree shift, laughing alongside Luthor's employees, I'll avoid the word goons, since the internet ruined that one, lol, and snorting cocaine while his agents die exploring the QUC. It's both shocking and darkly funny in true Gunn fashion. All in all, Peacemaker Season 2 might not have been what most people expected, he says, but that's exactly what makes it work. It trades some of the outrageous energy of Season 1 for something more introspective and character-driven, while still holding on to the humor and chaos that define the series. The season isn't about bigger fights or multiversal cameos, it's about growth, grief, and identity. It's about a man learning to face the worst parts of himself, and sometimes seeing them reflected back through an alternate version of the world. At the same time, James Gunn uses this season to expand the DCU in clever ways, he says. From the formation of Checkmate to the reveal of Planet Salvation, it's clear he's laying the groundwork for what's next. Man of Tomorrow, Creature Commander Season 2, Lanterns, and beyond. Yet despite those larger connections, Peacemaker remains grounded in its humanity, in the broken, violent, and deeply sincere heart of Christopher Smith. If this truly is the end, it's a powerful and fitting send-off, funny, tragic, and unexpectedly profound, but if it's just another step forward, then Peacemaker continues to stand as the emotional core of Gunn's new DCU, proving that even the most flawed people can still find redemption. One brutal, ridiculous, heartfelt moment at a time. The only thing I have to add to all of that, Amr, is that with respect to Rick Flag Sr., I have seen the sentiment on Reddit and other places that that Rick Flag Sr. does not seem like the same person at all between the animated version in Creature Commandos and what Frank Grillo has so far portrayed in Peacemaker. And perhaps that is a character development moment, a character development situation, which I gotta finally sit down and watch Creature Commandos in order to really judge that for myself. But the people have now been like showing the appearance, right? It's like, okay, yes, clearly he looks different in animated form than he does in live action form. And I think, a lot of people kind of are hitting that easy button going like, yeah, they're not the same person. They're clearly different, da da da, whatever. It's like, okay, fine. If you guys want to remain closed minded about that, that is entirely your business. It's all subjective. You can feel however way you want with respect to that. But yeah, I think the character progression and the role reversal is intriguing. And one day, I will finally watch Creature Commandos and experience it for myself and figure out exactly how I feel about it. But all right, really, my thoughts on everything that you said with respect to Peacemaker can certainly be summed up in those Flightbox episodes that you still need to catch up on and listen to. So I will leave that where it is, and we will just head into, as you put it, the main course expected from your emails. He says, it's time to share my thoughts on whatever I watched, and we start with Star Trek The Next Generation Season 7. All right, here we go. We're sinking our teeth back into it. And yeah, this is definitely, we're either going to have to call these Dorsey-sized or Armor-sized. I don't know, not sure. But either way, here we go. Episodes 4 and 5, Season 7, TNG. Oh boy. Gambit, Parts 1 and 2. All right, here we go. Can't wait to hear what he has to say about this one. He says, oh yeah, so this is my first Star Trek episode after the month-long break/absence I took. Oh boy, how I've missed this. There's 4 episodes in and we already have our first two-parter of this season. The episode begins with the crew searching for Picard, who appears to be missing and then later presumed dead. One of them took out a weapon and fired. He was vaporized. Oh yeah, absolutely. He says this results in Riker becoming acting captain of the Enterprise and Data as acting first officer. There's a lot of good stuff in this two-parter that I really enjoyed, he says. When the news of Picard's death comes in, we don't see the entire crew's reaction, only Riker and Deanna's. Riker takes it the hardest, deciding to take extreme measures to bring some sense of justice to Picard's murder. Marina Sirtis delivers some excellent acting here in the scene where Troy confronts Riker in his quarters. It shows not just her empathy, but her strength in pushing through his walls. What stood out to me in Gambit, he says, is how it blends the tone of a space opera mystery with the feel of a heist movie, all while keeping strong character focus. The Picard is dead opening is a gut punch, but what makes it work is that the episode doesn't linger too long on grief. Instead, it uses that shock to push mainly Riker into morally challenged decisions. I also like, he says, how the story flips expectations. Picard isn't dead, duh. He's undercover, playing the role of a mercenary. Seeing him operate outside of Starfleet structures and lean into the deception makes for one of the most entertaining Picard performances. Meanwhile, Riker stepping into Picard's shoes and then also ending up in the mercenary crew gives us a great double act, where both men have to improvise around each other without blowing cover. And of course, the larger arc with the ancient Vulcan psionic weapon adds weight, he says, giving the two-parter a sense of galactic stakes without overshadowing the character drama. Picard's sudden appearance alive and among mercenaries plays beautifully into that what's really going on tension. Star Trek has played with both amnesia and brainwashing tropes before, so the setup keeps you guessing. And since it's Picard, he says, you almost expect it to be some sort of undercover mission, but the episode does a good job of holding back just a tiny bit to make you doubt for a while. From that point on, this two-parter becomes full of tension with a lot of twists and turns, he says. Riker gets captured by this mercenary group, which leads to Data becoming acting captain and Worf as acting first officer. This is another great part of the two-parter, seeing Data as captain. Since Data is an android, he knows exactly what to do, but Worf, who's used to being a security officer, doesn't step smoothly into the first officer role. What I also liked about Data here, he says, is how the episode portrayed his actions with absolute bluntness. Of course he cares about his friends, but the story leaned a bit into the android without feelings trope, really more about him applying regulations with total precision, and this is highlighted through Worf's frustrations with his command style. Their friction makes for a fascinating little leadership study within the larger plot. Yes, it does. The B plot with Worf and Data was surprisingly strong with this particular episode. It really was, and they've done that with Data before. If you remember when he was in charge of the Sutherland in Redemption Part 2 way back in Season 5 of TNG. Similar theme, if you will, but this is like a natural progression of Data in a command structure and how he handles it as an android. So yeah, I'm with you on that. He says the finale rather, of this two-party was also clever. Throughout the story, we see the mercenary group collecting artifacts, which, when joined together, form an ancient and powerful Vulcan weapon that amplifies and projects destructive thoughts. A member of this mercenary crew is a female Vulcan named Talera, who claims she was sent by Vulcan security to locate and neutralize the weapon before it falls into the hands of extremist Vulcans who resent their society's openness to outsiders. At first, she seems like an ally, but it's later revealed she lied and was in fact the leader of that very extremist faction. Another of the many twists that this two-parter delivers. What I liked most, he says, was how the weapon was defeated. The only way to overpower it was to rid yourself of violent or negative thoughts, since the weapon's power literally feeds on them and amplifies them. That resolution is so quintessentially Star Trek, ending not with brute force, but with discipline of the mind and spirit. It ties beautifully into Vulcan philosophy, showing that their supposed strength of logic and emotional control can be both a weapon's source of power and its undoing. Talera's betrayal works on two levels. It's a classic Trek twist of an undercover extremist, and it challenges the perception of Vulcans as wholly enlightened. That nuance adds depth to the Federation's allies and shows that even Vulcans can fracture under ideology. It's also weird, he says, how I've now seen two stories across two different shows in this franchise that dealt with xenophobic extremist groups. Of course, both TNG and DS9 were airing in the same era, but given today's political climates, it really stood out to me. I can't help but wonder what was happening in the 90s that made both shows want to tell stories about extremist factions and cultural fear of outsiders. Oh, a lot of the same shit that's happening now, Amr. It's just that now we have the internet to spread it to us 24/7, 365. We didn't have that in the 90s. So a lot of that stuff that was going on, we heard later, kind of like in delayed form, if you will. But yeah, same stuff. History is doomed to forever repeat itself. And yeah, it's no different here in this case. There is one note that I want to make about Talera before moving on. You may not know this, because I don't remember if you have seen the original series. Like, I don't. You didn't start off with the original series, right? You started with TNG, if I remember correctly. But here's the thing: the actress who played Talera, her name is Robin Curtis. Robin Curtis has already, like at that point, she was a Star Trek veteran. She played Lieutenant Savick specifically in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, and Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home. And it's important that I say specifically because when you look up Lieutenant Savick, you're going to see two actresses. You're going to see Kirstie Alley, who played the character in Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, where she was introduced. And then you're going to see Robin Curtis, who took over in the role for Star Trek 3 and 4. And, Kirstie Alley, has passed on. She passed on about a year or so ago. Fundamentally, in terms of Star Trek, like ideals and whatnot, Robin Curtis is far closer in real life to those ideals than Kirstie Alley was before she passed. But yeah, that is so when we watched that episode, when we saw Gambit for the first time, that was absolutely an Easter egg for us, knowing who Robin Curtis was and who she originally played and how she originally endeared herself to us as Savick in Star Trek 3 largely, but also a little bit in Star Trek 4 as well, because that was the last time that we saw her character on the big screen. So yeah, just a bit of Trek trivia that I'm not sure that you were aware of with respect to this particular episode, indeed. But yeah, Gambit, a very good two-parter, especially with respect to, like you said, the heist film and all the twists and turns and whatnot that it had. Oh, another thing, also want to point out, there's an NBA player in this episode too. The Klingon officer who they commandeered, who had one of the pieces of the psionic weapon, that's James Worthy, former LA Laker. That's why he was so tall. Seriously, James Worthy is that damn tall. Like NBA legend James Worthy. So yeah, I wanted to point that out as well. Glad I just remembered that. That's awesome. All right, next is episode 6, Phantasms. Oh boy. This is a favorite, yes, indeed. He says this is a soft follow-up to the Season 6 episode Birthright Part 1, at least the first half, since the rest of Birthright focuses more on Worf. Phantasms builds off the concept introduced in Birthright Part 1, where Data first begins to experience dreams thanks to the activation of his dream program. That program was originally created by Dr. Soong, but remained dormant until it was accidentally triggered when Data received a plasmic shock from an alien device. This episode pushes that idea further, showing not just Data's exploration of the subconscious, but how dangerous and unpredictable that frontier can be for an android or for someone who has never dreamed before. It's both a psychological study and a horror-tinged mystery. You got that right. The tone shift halfway through the episode, he says, from introspective exploration to eerie tension as Data begins to act violently under subconscious influence, makes it one of the stranger and more memorable Data episodes. It gives Brent Spiner another chance to show just how alien yet human Data can feel, especially as his own mind turns against him. Hold very still, counselor. Oh, that scene. Okay, think about this. When I watched that episode, like remember how that ends? Like it went into commercial break with him stabbing her, and you just see the cold look on his face right as she's screaming as he is stabbing her in the turbo lift, and it's like, oh my god, what is happening? Why is he doing this? Is he gonna kill her? Is she gonna die? Oh my goodness, yeah, it's oh yeah, really creepy, really powerful. He says the concept of Data dreaming for some reason reminds me of the book title Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? I haven't read the book, but I have seen the movie inspired by it, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. There might be small similarities in terms of themes between that story and this episode. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep and Blade Runner both explore the blurry line between human and artificial consciousness, asking what it means to be truly alive? In Phantasms, Data's dreams serve a similar purpose. They push him beyond mere logic or programming into the realm of the irrational, symbolic, and emotional, in other words, the most human aspects of existence. While Blade Runner uses dreaming and memory as metaphors for identity and empathy, Star Trek takes it further by actually granting its android dreams, not as illusion or malfunction, but as a legitimate next step in his evolution. The nightmare imagery, even the notion of subconscious expression, all suggests that Data isn't just mimicking humanity anymore, he's genuinely developing one. While Birthright introduces us to the concept of Data dreaming, this episode takes that idea to the next logical step. What if Data had nightmares? That's what makes Phantasm such an intriguing continuation of Birthright, he says. In Birthright Part 1, dreaming was portrayed as a wondrous, almost spiritual breakthrough, the first tangible sign that Data's mind could go beyond programming into imagination. But Phantasms explores the darker side of that gift. If Data can dream, then he can also experience nightmares. This evolution, he says, turns what once seemed like a blessing into something unsettling. His subconscious begins expressing itself through disturbing imagery, crew members as machines, mouths appearing on people's bodies, violent impulses surfacing without his control. It's a clever metaphor for Data's growing complexity. Becoming more human means inheriting not just creativity and wonder, but also anxiety, fear, and repressed emotion. What's brilliant about the episode is how it blends psychological horror with science fiction mystery, he says, showing that even an android's journey towards humanity comes with its own subconscious darkness. This episode is also notable for being directed by Patrick Stewart. It seems Stewart gravitates toward data-centric stories when he directs. The previous episodes he directed, Hero Worship in Season 5 and A Fistful of Datas in Season 6, also explored different facets of Data's identity. That leads me to wonder if he directed a later episode of Season 7 that you haven't run into yet. Be very curious if that's the case. You'll know it when you see it, trust me. In Phantasms, Stewart balances eerie surrealism with subtle humor, especially in the dream sequences, he says. You can tell he's fascinated by the psychological nuance of Data's evolution, what it means for an artificial life form to grapple with subconscious fears, and in a meta way. It's fitting that the actor who plays Picard, the human guiding Data toward understanding humanity, is also the one directing these particular steps in Data's journey. Since this is an episode about nightmares, he says, creepy imagery is expected. It reminded me of the Season 4 episode Night Terrors, where the crew is incapable of dreaming and begins hallucinating, and also Schisms from Season 6, where the crew is abducted during sleep and experimented on. Phantasms definitely feels like a spiritual successor to both Schisms and Night Terrors, he says. All three explore the intersection of sleep, the subconscious, and the uncanny through the lens of science fiction. Like Schisms, Phantasms uses dream logic and unsettling imagery, the mouth on Troy's shoulder, Data slicing into Deanna to create a quiet horror that feels just slightly out of phase with normal TNG reality. The tone is eerie, but restrained, the way the Next Generation often handles psychological horror. And Night Terrors also fits thematically with its crew wide sleep deprivation, leading to surreal hallucinations and creeping madness. The difference is that in Phantasms, the horror is contained within Data's mind, which makes it more personal and symbolically rich. It's about the subconscious of a machine trying to interpret fear and anxiety for the first time. It's one of those episodes where TNG flexes its range, a sci-fi procedural one week and a psychological horror story the next, yet all within the same thematic framework of exploring consciousness and humanity. This episode might have its creepy and surreal imagery, but it's not without its funny moments as always. Picard avoiding the banquet, and the engineer who has a crush on Geordi. And don't forget my most favorite hilarious point, which is where they confine Data to quarters, and Worf has to confiscate his phaser, but he also asks Worf to take control of Spot. As Worf puts it, your animal. And he's like, and you must feed him. He prefers feline supplement number 29, and I understand. And tell him he is a good cat and a brave cat or whatever. I forget he said. And he just looks at him and goes, "I will feed him. Perhaps that will be enough." Right? Like that to me. And then of course he immediately like sneezes in the hallway because he's clearly like allergic to cat dander in that regard. But yeah, just Data wanting to make certain that that Spot was out of his threat, if you will, because he didn't want his violent tendencies to affect his pet in that regard for sure. So that is definitely a hilarious moment from the episode that I really like. Amr says that balance between eerie and humorous is one of Phantasm's underrated strengths. Despite the surreal and creepy moments, it never loses TNG's trademark charm. The subplot about Picard trying to avoid the tedious banquet feels like classic Next Generation humor. Oh yeah, that's right, because Nakamura kept getting on him about going to the banquet because they couldn't activate the warp core. The captain of the Federation flagship trying to dodge social obligations, he says. Stewart plays it with a dry wit that breaks the tension at just the right moments. And the bit with the engineer crushing on Geordi is another great little slice of character humor. It's nice seeing Geordi in an awkward but lighthearted situation that isn't one of his usual romantic misfires. It's just funny and endearing. Those comedic touches make the creepy imagery stand out even more because the tonal contrast keeps you off balance. You can laugh 1 minute and feel unsettled the next, which is part of what makes Phantasm so memorable. We later find out, of course, that Data's nightmares aren't without reason, but rather a warning, he says. It turns out there are tiny interphasic organisms that have infested the Enterprise's warp systems and crew due to a new warp core component. Data's dreams were metaphorical warnings about this, and ultimately the key to solving the problem. The way Picard, Geordi worked to interpret the symbols in Data's dreams reminded me of the Season 5 episode Darmok, Shaka When the Walls Fell. Like Darmok, this episode takes communication through metaphor and symbolism and makes it the key to understanding. There is another episode this season that's going to do the exact same thing. And I'll be very interested to hear what you feel about that one. In Phantasms, he says, Data's subconscious becomes the alien language, and Picard and Geordi have to translate it to uncover what he's trying to tell them, even though he doesn't consciously know it himself. It's such a clever narrative device, the idea that an android who's supposedly all logic and programming can experience symbolic dreams that communicate in imagery rather than words. The callbacks in the dreams, the mouth on Troy's shoulder, the interphasic parasites as metaphors all tie beautifully into the mystery-solving aspect that makes TNG so rewarding. And it's not just a random Data has nightmares story, he says. The episode grounds the surrealism in science fiction logic. The dream world becomes both a riddle and a diagnostic tool, which feels perfectly fitting for Data. Overall, this was a great episode. It seems Data is evolving in more ways than one. Perhaps he's closer to being human than ever before. I'm genuinely interested to see where this character goes in this final season. Phantasms really feels like a milestone in Data's journey. Each human experience he gains, emotions, imagination, now dreams and even nightmares, adds another layer to his evolution. What's particularly moving, he says, is that these experiences aren't always pleasant. Dreaming, feeling fear, even confronting subconscious imagery, they're deeply human, but they come with vulnerability. And yet Data embraces them with curiosity instead of fear, which is what makes him so endearing. Hey, I'm with you on that. And, like I mentioned, there's another episode that deals with another part of Data, like kind of in an evolutionary sense, but maybe a little bit more one note that I really enjoy. It's not necessarily, it's an infamous episode among the fans, but it's one that I really like. But then there's two other episodes that also deal with Data, like directly, that certainly can be considered part of his evolution as well. So yeah, get ready for some more Data-centric episodes beyond this one for the rest of this season for sure. Yeah. But no, fantastic work and great character work, certainly by Brent Spiner with respect to, and the writing as well with respect to how dark this is. Phantasms is definitely, I think would be more of a fan favorite for sure in a number of ways, especially in this particular season. All right. So that's it for TNG. So now let's move on to Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 2, because Amr's got a couple of episodes from there that he watched. 3 episodes in particular that he watched from that show. So here we go. Let's start with episode 4, Invasive Procedures. He says, good to be back on DS9. So I watched this after episode 4 of TNG, and then after this, I went back for the conclusion of that 2-parter. With that said, what do we have here? Well, Invasive Procedures offers us the first normal DS9 after the fantastic 3-episode opening arc. Here we have a Trill taking DS9 hostage with only one goal, to take the Dax symbiont. Yes, indeed, John Glover. John Glover, everybody, those of you who know him as, Lionel Luthor from Lois and Clark, if I'm not mistaken, but also as the Riddler from Batman the Animated Series, among other things. He was also Savannah's father in Shazam, and he was the crazy doctor in Arkham that tried to kill Poison Ivy and it didn't work out in Batman and Robin. Yes, John Glover, well-known character actor. He is this Trill that we're talking about here in this episode. He says Invasive Procedures does feel like a step back into the standalone mode after the big political arc, but it also manages to explore Trill culture and the dangers of obsession with symbionts. The idea of someone believing they're meant to be joined to the point of endangering others makes for a tense and character-driven story. This episode gives us more insight into Trill culture and lets us see, or more often hear, how Trills and symbionts are paired and just how significant a joining really is. It's made clear that not every Trill gets joined. In fact, only a very small percentage of Trill are ever selected, which makes the symbionts rare and highly protected. That's what makes Varad's desperation feel even more intense. He says this is one of the first times DS9 slows down to explain what being joined really means, beyond what was briefly touched on in TNG's The Host. We hear more about the depth of the bond, how it defines a person's entire sense of self, and why the symbionts are so highly valued. It makes Dax's situation feel more precarious. She's not just a hostage. She's essentially the keeper of a legacy that spans lifetimes. This episode doesn't offer much in story, but what it lacks in story, it delivers plenty with characters, he says. Now, of course, there's a story, but a very simple and basic one, and what drives the episodes are the characters, especially Cisco and, of course, Jadzia Dax. Invasive Procedures is really a character study wrapped in a simple station takeover plot. The hijacking itself isn't groundbreaking, but it's a perfect stage to dig into Jadzia's vulnerability and what the symbiote means to her. Cisco stands out here, Amr says. His loyalty to Dax is palpable, not just to Jadzia, but to Curzon before her. That personal history gives the conflict weight, because for Cisco, this isn't just protecting a crew member, it's protecting a lifelong friend carried forward through lifetimes. Also, a very surprising guest appearance by John Glover, who plays Varad. Glover, of course, as I said earlier, is primarily known for his role as Lionel Luthor in Smallville. He brings that slippery, charismatic intensity he's so good at, the same quality that made Lionel unforgettable. As Varad, he captures both the insecurity of a man desperate to be joined and the smug arrogance that comes once he has the symbiote. It's almost unsettling to see him channel Dax for a bit, because it shows how much of the host's personality can shift under the symbiote's influence. Glover sells that transformation in a way that makes the stakes of the episode feel higher than the fairly straightforward plot would suggest. The most interesting thing this episode offers, Amr says, other than its tidbits about Trill culture, is the second half, where Varad is joined with Dax, and now we see the very off version of Dax. He, of course, still retains the memories of his previous lifetimes, most importantly his relationship with Cisco, and in this part is where the episode shines. Varad, Dax, and Benjamin Cisco. Cisco, of course, wants Jadzia back, and Varad, of course, refuses. Since Dax is only a symbiont, the Varad part still takes hold. That's the real heart of the episode, he says. The first half is more setup, but once Varad becomes Varad Dax, the tension spikes. Suddenly, it isn't just about a hostage situation. It's about Cisco facing a twisted reflection of his closest friend. The way Cisco navigates that is fascinating. He knows Dax is in there, all those lifetimes, all those shared memories, but it's also warped through Varad's insecurity and selfishness. That mix creates this off version of Dax, familiar enough to sting but alien enough to unsettle. It makes the drama personal in a way that a simple villain steals something plot usually wouldn't. Cisco isn't just fighting to save his officer, he's fighting for the return of the bond that defines him, his old man. Dr. Bashir also shines a little bit in this episode, he says. I guess the show constantly reminding us about his attraction and feeling towards Jadzia Dax in Season 1 pays off a bit here. Bashir's feelings for Jadzia, which in Season 1 often came across as overeager or even comic, actually serve the story here. His determination to protect her, and his refusal to give up even when the odds look bad, shows there's more depth to his affection than just surface-level flirting. It's subtle, but in a hostage story like this, it matters, he says. Bashir has that extra layer of personal motivation that helps him step up, making his presence feel more integral than just the station's doctor happened to be there. It's one of those early signs that the writers are slowly deepening his character. Yeah, but they've only scratched the surface. They're not there yet. You'll get there. Don't worry. Also, Benjamin trying to persuade Muriel was another thing that was enjoyable to see. This is an episode with the most basic of stories, but it delivers the most with its characters with just dialogue and little action. The Muriel angle is a great point. Sisko's calm, measured attempt to reach her shows his real strength, not just as a strategist or a commander, but as someone who can read people and work their emotions. Instead of charging in phasers blazing, he leans on persuasion, planting doubt and appeal to Mariel's loyalty and conscience. It's classic Star Trek in that way. The drama doesn't come from explosions, but from words, convictions, and choices. Invasive Procedures has a very straightforward premise, take the symbiont, but it succeeds because it's a character showcase. The episode thrives on dialogue, psychology, and the interplay between Sisko, Dax, Varad, and even Mariel, rather than spectacle. And yet again, a very thorough breakdown of an episode that I personally have not watched very much of. Obviously, I've seen Invasive Procedures and I know everything you just said, but I've never watched it enough like over time to really like have that kind of a breakdown or appreciation for it. So, nice job, Armor. Appreciate the depth on that one for sure. So next we move to an episode that I've definitely seen, but really there's not a whole lot of it I personally remember. Episode 5, Cardassians. He says another great episode. Cardassians poses a lot of moral questions wrapped in an engaging mystery. While the previous episode had a fairly simple premise, this one is richer in story. It leans hard into what DS9 does best, exploring the fallout of the Cardassian occupation and the messy, often uncomfortable moral consequences. On the surface, it's about a Cardassian boy raised by Bajorans, but beneath that lie questions of identity, propaganda, trauma, and political manipulation. It contrasts nicely with Invasive Procedures, which was more character-driven with a simple setup, while here the mystery structure allows the room for political intrigue while keeping it personal. Hang on. I'm now remembering more about this episode. Okay, because I had to picture the boy. All right, I got it. I understand it now. I remember it now is what I should say. Amr says the first season of DS9 made efforts to draw sympathy toward Bajor and the Bajorans, giving us clear antagonists in the Cardassians. However, over time, that show complicates that binary. Bajorans aren't entirely flawless, and Cardassians aren't wholly evil. Episode 19, Duet, already showed this with an individual Cardassian wrestling with guilt. Cardassians continues this by showing Cardassians in a morally gray light, particularly through Rugel's father, Kotan. Unlike Goldar Heel, Dukat, or other politically extreme figures, Kotan is portrayed simply as a father desperate to reunite with his son. Rugel, raised by Bajorans, sees his father as an enemy, creating heartbreaking tension and illustrating the complexities of identity, upbringing, and prejudice. The episode also features the peculiar and compelling Garak, marking his second appearance. As in his first appearance in Season 1, we see his dynamic with Bashir beginning to develop. Bashir is idealistic and naive, while Garak is layered, secretive, and manipulative. You have no idea. He says, in Cardassians, Garak nudges Bashir into situations he might otherwise avoid, testing him, while also showing a subtle fondness for the young doctor's openness. This episode makes clear that Garak is not a one-off curiosity. He's a recurring figure whose motives are deliberately ambiguous, keeping the audience guessing. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Prepare yourself, Armor. This is only scratching the surface of Mr. Elim Garak. Oh yes. I can't wait till you get to the rest of it. It's going to be awesome. He says Chief O'Brien also shines here. His discomfort with Cardassians is well established in TNG, but DS9 forces him to confront it directly through his interactions with Rugel. O'Brien struggles to balance his resentment toward the Cardassian occupation with the fact that Rugel is an innocent child who has been raised to hate his own identity. This personal tension highlights the lingering impact of trauma and prejudice. The scene where O'Brien tells Rugel not all Cardassians are bad is subtle but powerful, emphasizing personal growth, empathy, and the possibility of breaking cycles of hate. Bashir steps up significantly in this episode, taking an active role in uncovering the truth, he says. He isn't just along for the ride, he pieces together the political manipulation, identifies the stakes for Rugel, and drives the resolution going forward. His idealism is balanced by intelligence and determination, making him an integral part of the story. Gul Dukat functions as the main antagonist, though not a simple mustache-twirling villain. True to form, Amr says he manipulates multiple sides, presenting himself as concerned for Rugel while using the situation for political gain. He complicates Sisko's position, pressures the Bajorans, and exploits Kotan's vulnerability. Dukat's machinations highlight DS9's move away from Alien of the Week antagonists towards recurring figures with layered, long-term agendas, perfectly contrasting the sincere grief of Kotan. The episode's central theme is bigotry and its consequences, he says. O'Brien's internalized hatred, the Bajoran's trauma, Rugel's self-hatred, and Ducat's manipulation all intersect to show the complexities of prejudice and identity. DS9 portrays these issues in a grounded human way, making the sci-fi setting a lens for real-world parallels. The ending is bittersweet but hopeful. Rugel is reunited with Kotan, illustrating the potential for reconciliation. Ducat's interference underscores the persistent challenges, yet there's a sense that progress is possible. Unlike Duet, which delivers tragic closure, Cardassians leaves the audience with a quieter sense of possibility, a hallmark of Star Trek's optimistic ethos that compassion, truth, and understanding can gradually lead to change. Amr says, overall, Cardassians excels in weaving personal, political, and moral dimensions together. It deepens character arcs, highlights complex social dynamics, and emphasizes DS9's strength in exploring morally gray areas, making it a standout episode in the early run of the series. Yes, and there's a lot more depth with respect to those characters that you're talking about. Certainly Ducat, and most certainly Garrick. So just buckle up and prepare for that, because way more where that came from. You're only in season 2, the beginnings of season 2. And here comes the last episode that Amr watched for season 2 of this series so far, which is episode 6, Melora. He says the Star Trek universe has always been about a bright, collaborative future where humanity sets aside its differences to build a better world. So the last story one might expect Star Trek to tackle is disability, especially since most modern diseases have been cured or made easily treatable in this era. That's why seeing a Starfleet officer struggle with a disability feels so surprising and refreshing. Star Trek often envisions a future beyond limitation, he says. Yet Melora stands out because it portrays a Starfleet officer with a physical challenge and focuses on how the Federation accommodates her rather than trying to fix her. It reminds us that progress doesn't mean erasing difference. Melora's low-gravity physiology isn't something to cure. It's part of who she is. The episode explores that delicate line between medical advancement and respecting individuality, a theme that fits beautifully with Star Trek's humanist ideals. Beyond its intriguing premise, Amr says, the episode also gives Dr. Julian Bashir more time in the spotlight. In Season 1, he was mostly defined by his awkward crush on Jadzia Dax. We get it. He liked her. But I appreciate how this season has begun to move past that, he says. We saw it in Invasive Procedures, where Bashir steps up not just to save someone he's infatuated with, but a friend. Yeah? There's more depth coming for his character as well, but this definitely is a Bashir-centered episode for sure. Here, his compassion towards Melora feels genuine, Amr says, driven by empathy and curiosity, not romantic pursuit. It reframes his romantic nature as something more mature and sincere. His connection with Melora isn't about conquest or charm, it's about understanding and acceptance. It's like the writers learned from the pitfalls of Geordi LaForge's awkward love stories in TNG. Instead of repeating that pattern, they use Bashir's interactions to show growth and emotional depth. He's sensitive, but not pathetic. His interest in Melora is rooted in admiration and respect. He sees her as a capable person, not someone to fix. That's a great way of putting it, Amr. They learned lessons from how awkwardly they wrote Geordi in TNG and did the opposite with Bashir in DS9. And that continues. Oh boy, does that continue. My goodness. He says Melora herself is a fascinating creation. An Elasian Starfleet officer with a gravity-based disability. Her condition is clever, a clever and believable one for this universe. Elasians live on a planet with a low gravitational field, so when exposed to standard gravity, their bodies struggle to adapt, a concept that fits perfectly into Star Trek's logic of diverse life forms. It's an elegant way to explore themes of physical limitation, accessibility, and independence without breaking the setting's realism. What's great is how this concept feels natural within Starfleet's diversity, he says. Of course, officers from different worlds would face unique physiological challenges. The Federation's goal isn't to eliminate those differences, but to accommodate them, and that makes Melora's story resonate all the more. Even in a future of warp drives and replicators, accessibility and self-determination remain deeply personal issues. Melora's pride is at the heart of the story, he says. She doesn't want to be pitied or defined by her condition. Her pride isn't arrogance, it's self-preservation. She's fought for every bit of independence in a world not built for her, which makes her defensive when others try to help. For anyone who's ever felt underestimated because of something beyond their control, Melora embodies quiet defiance. She wants to earn her place, not have it handed to her out of sympathy. The episode respects that. Bashir learns to admire her strength and respect her boundaries rather than trying to change her. Representation like this feels natural in Star Trek, Amr says. The franchise has always used science fiction to normalize diversity, racial, cultural, ideological, and now physical. Melora isn't a token issue episode. It's a reaffirmation of Star Trek's core belief. The future must include everyone. Melora's story says that even in a utopia, there will always be people who face unique challenges, and they too have a place among the stars. Melora's medical dilemma echoes TNG's ethics, he says. In that episode, Worf's paralysis raised questions about medical ethics and personal agency. Here, Melora faces a choice: undergo a treatment that would let her function in standard gravity without assistance, but at the cost of her ability to live on her own world. It's not just a medical question, it's existential. Should she fix herself if it means losing a part of who she is? The episode challenges the assumption that disability must always be corrected. For Melora, he says her physiology isn't a flaw, it's part of her identity. Choosing to keep it is an act of self acceptance. Star Trek often preaches progress, but here it reminds us that progress can also mean learning to value what makes us different. The B plot, involving Quark and his old associate Falit Kot, seems at first like comic relief. Quark's shady past catching up with him is standard fare for DS9, but when Kot takes Melora, Dax, and Quark hostage, the subplot merges meaningfully with the main story. Melora's zero-gravity training becomes the key to saving them, turning what could have been filler into a powerful moment of agency. Her pride and adaptability, the very traits that once isolated her, are what save lives. It's a clever way of showing that her limitations are also her strengths. Amr says her conversation with Jadzia about the Little Mermaid is another standout. Jadzia compares Melora's choice to the mermaid giving up her underwater life for legs, and whether she truly lived happily ever after. It's a beautiful parallel that captures Melora's struggle between belonging and authenticity. Jadzia doesn't tell her what to do, she simply offers perspective. It's an intimate, thoughtful moment that could only happen on DS9. In the end, Melora chooses to remain as she is. Amr says it might be a limitation, but it's her limitation, part of her identity. The decision is quietly powerful, a refusal to let the universe decide who she should be. It's a bittersweet ending, but a hopeful one, grounded in self-acceptance rather than conformity. Overall, he says this was a deeply thoughtful episode, one you might not expect from Star Trek, yet completely fitting for it. It explores disability, autonomy, and identity in a way that feels both futuristic and timeless. It also marks another step forward for Bashir, who's evolving from an eager, love-struck young doctor into a genuinely empathetic, complex character. And I tell you what, if you listen to Amr's descriptions and you've never watched Deep Space Nine before, you'd think to yourself, okay, he's already past season 2, right? No, he's still in season 2. He's just started season 2. And yet he is highlighting a lot of the bright spots, like intellectually and in terms of the storytelling of what season 2 did, right? Like what seasons 1 and 2 have done to this point. And I mean, now I'm starting to become a little bit curious because I've mentioned before, Amr, how everything changes with season 3. Everything changes. There's a big thing that you have not been introduced to yet that you're going to be introduced to, and it is going to change this entire series. And it is seen by many, including myself, as a fantastic change, an incredible change that really throws this show into another level of complexity that even in seasons 1 and 2, we weren't, like privy to, like nothing that we could have foreseen in that regard. But we're still seeing how DS9, even before all that happens, already had the groundwork laid for these types of stories that they were telling. And we're going to see more stuff like this. I don't want to scare you, Amr, into thinking that all of a sudden the complexity that we're getting with characters and, with moral dilemmas and moral implications like this are going to go away. Oh no, they're not going to go away. We're going to see more stuff like this. Absolutely. No question about that. But I'm just saying, I'm now curious to see how you will interpret the turn, because the turn's coming. You're not there yet. You've got to get through the majority of this season. You're going to get to the end of the season, and holy shit, cannot wait to see your reaction. Cannot wait to hear your reaction to it, good sir. But so far, you have given us some great introspective looks at so far at the first season and into the first first 6 episodes now of season 2 with respect to DS9. So I appreciate that insight indeed. But this isn't the end of your email. You mentioned earlier there was a part of your email title that was redacted. And so I get here down to the bottom and it says bonus episode in red. What bonus episode? What did you watch? What did you watch, good sir? Well, as it turns out, you watched, oh my goodness, Star Trek the original series. What do you know? I brought this up earlier and you have decided to traverse into the original series. Well, how about that? He says episode 1, The Man Trap. Whoa. Okay. So what is this, you ask, he says. Am I really starting a third Star Trek show? Well, not exactly, he says. My curiosity brought me here. My only attachment to anything original series related has been the Kelvin Timeline films, so I wanted to see how the source material holds up in comparison. If you remember, Ray, I said Star Trek was a franchise I wanted to explore, and I chose to begin with TNG because I worried the age of the original series might be a barrier. Ah, yes, you did say that. Gotcha. Thank you for that refresher. Appreciate that. So after watching the episode that introduced Star Trek to audiences, The Man Trap, I realized I had nothing to worry about, he says. This is Star Trek through and through. Philosophical questions, moral dilemmas, new species and cultures, and character-driven storytelling. Yeah, you know what? All of that is in the episode. And I want to point out, and you probably already know this, and you may bring this up later, The Man Trap, of course, is not the pilot. The Man Trap was actually, I think, the fifth episode produced for season one of the original series, but it is the first episode that aired on September 8th, 1966. 59 years ago. That's right. The 60th is next year. Most certainly it is. But this is the first one, The Man Trap. And yeah, everything that you're talking about with respect to philosophical questions, moral dilemmas, new species and cultures, character driven storytelling. Oh, yeah, that's Man Trap. That's absolutely the very first episode of TOS. Now, TOS, I'm going to tell you what, thanks to the Sci-Fi Channel re-releasing those episodes in unedited form back in the 90s and me recording them on VHS, I've seen all 79 episodes of the original series a lot. A hell of a lot. So, yeah. These are details. I might even remember details from these episodes more than TNG because I've also been rewatching TOS recently as well on Pluto TV. So, yeah, I'm very curious. Here, let's dive into it. He says, first off, I never really paid close attention to how William Shatner looked in his prime, and I have to say, Chris Pine was perfect casting. Yeah, I'm with you on that one. They did a great job with that. Now, expect a lot of comparisons to the Kelvin Timeline films, he says. But like I said, those are my only reference to anything related to the original series. Maybe I shouldn't make comparisons, but right now it seems like when I start delving into the show in the future, it would be making me appreciate and like those films even more. Very possible. Be very curious to see how that goes. He says Shatner's youthful energy and charisma line up perfectly with Pine's take on Kirk, bold, confident, and deeply principled. The same goes for Leonard Nimoy's Spock and Nichelle Nichols' Uhura, whose portrayals clearly and obviously inspired Zachary Quinto and Zoe Saldana's modern versions. I mean, where else would you look for inspiration? Not just in personality, but even in mannerisms and presence. There is one thing that I do want to point out, Amr, and that is this. It should be noted, just for reference, that the original series is 9 years, chronologically speaking, after the timeline of the Kelvin timeline. The idea of the Kelvin timeline is that everybody met early, like much earlier than they would have normally met. And so that film series, like the first film of that, if I'm not mistaken, is in 2257. This show starts in 2266. And this is important because there's going to be differences in all these characters. This is something they're dealing with right now, actually, on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, because they're leading into where characters like Spock and Uhura and Kirk would be going into this season of the original series. At this point, Kirk has already been in command of a ship, and the Enterprise is his next command, right? He's already been a first officer and a commander elsewhere. The Enterprise is his next command, right? So he is more of a seasoned officer. He's not necessarily a veteran at this point, but he's definitely had a lot more years under his belt than Pine's Kirk did. Way more, right? Pine's Kirk ascended to captain much faster than Shatner's Kirk did. So that is important to note, that you're dealing with younger versions of the characters that don't quite have the seasoning and the experience yet that these versions do. So there's going to be similarities, and they're going to build off some stuff. But really, the only character age-wise that might be closest to their counterpart in the Kelvin timeline is the one that you're about to talk about next, Dr. McCoy. He says, interestingly, the episode focuses on Dr. McCoy rather than Spock or Kirk, as the Enterprise visits a planet to check on Professor Robert Crater, an archaeologist whose wife Nancy was once an old flame of McCoy's. That personal connection gives the story unexpected emotional depth. Still, we get a strong sense of the rest of the crew. Kirk's decisiveness and moral clarity, Spock's logical restraint, and Uhura's quiet professionalism that grounds the bridge scenes. It's also fascinating, he says, to see how how early the show established its iconic dynamics. The tension between Spock's logic and McCoy's emotion is already there, as is the warmth and camaraderie among the crew. Even the brief teasing exchange between Uhura and Spock hints at the chemistry that the Kelvin films would later adapt. Thank you Thank you right there. And thank you for saying that, Amr. And I'm going to tell you why. Because I remember that being a problem back in 2009 with the diehard Star Trek fans. They did not appreciate the romance between Uhura and Spock. And my reference point for it was this episode. Now, to be fair, that's not really something that you see developed throughout the rest of the show. However, the seeds for something like that happening earlier on in their careers is from this episode. Yes, there absolutely is that scene and that moment, and the Kelvin timeline chose to expound upon that. Most certainly, absolutely. It was already cemented there for sure. So yes, thank you for picking up on that. That is an excellent point. Thank you, thank you, thank you. He says, as for the story, something is immediately off about Nancy Crater. Each person perceives her differently. McCoy sees the young woman he once loved. Kirk sees her as she truly is. And a crewman sees someone entirely different. Yes, Starnell saw completely different, like a blonde bombshell. This clever setup signals that something isn't right and plays with one of Star Trek's recurring themes. Perception shapes truth and emotion can cloud judgment, he says. Eventually, we learn that Nancy is actually a shape-shifting creature, the last of its kind, that feeds on salt from living beings. Its ability to mimic appearances makes it both fascinating and dangerous, and the crew's efforts to understand it before acting highlight the show's blend of suspense, morality, and science fiction. And of course, there's the dilemma at the heart of it all. Do you destroy the last of the species simply because it's dangerous, or do you let it live? The creature isn't evil, he says, it's simply trying to survive. Dr. Crater's story about the buffalo drives this point home, drawing a parallel between extinction and necessity. McCoy's emotional conflict deepens this further as he struggles to accept that the woman he once loved is gone and that duty must come before sentiment. The final act ties everything together beautifully, he says. The crew uncovers the truth as more deaths occur. Bodies drained of salt, and McCoy, still seeing the woman he remembers, hesitates until Spock forces him to confront reality. Only then does he fire, killing the creature to save Kirk. It's tragic, he says, yet inevitable, embodying the moral tension that defines Star Trek, balancing empathy with responsibility, emotion with logic. He says, despite its 1960s pacing and 50-minute runtime, the man trap feels immediately familiar to anyone who's watched TNG or DS9. The structure, themes, and character dynamics are timeless. It's a strong start for the original series and a fascinating entry point for understanding where Star Trek's enduring appeal truly began. Ah, so there you have it. He's now dove into, so wow, he's on three fronts. Here we go. So he's diving deeper into TNG season 7, DS9 season 2, and now he has watched the first aired episode of Star Trek the original series. Here we go. And you know what? I hear in the Kelvin timeline comparisons, I totally get that. I'm actually fascinated to hear your perspective as somebody that got into it, because that's something that I always hoped would happen with the Kelvin timeline. I don't know how much it happened. I'm sure there are some people that got into Star Trek through the Kelvin timeline, and it did inspire them to watch the original series. But yeah, the time differential between 2009 and 1966, like, yeah, that's going to be a lot for people to adjust to go back to 1966 old future push button click, like technology and graphics and whatnot. Even with the remastered versions of the episodes that now have the remastered visual effects, like space shots and things that they've added to modernize it further while not, intruding so much into the show, right? Basically giving them the budget for visual effects now that they didn't have in 1966. So they had to avoid using certain shots and doing certain things in that regard, right? But yeah, I'm very curious to hear what you have to say and hear your perspective on the original series from the perspective of a fan who got into this through the Kelvin timeline. So those comparisons, I welcome that. I'm very curious to see how you feel about it. So I look forward to more of your thoughts with respect to that, Amr. Definitely. He says, okay, well, this is it. That wraps up my very long email update since my last one a month ago. As always, I hope everyone's doing well. And Ray, please pass along my congratulations to Shonda. I hope I spelled that right. You did. On earning her master's degree. Wishing you all good health and high spirits. Live long and prosper. Regards, Amr Osama. Amr, I will pass along those good sentiments. Thank you as always for that. Greatly appreciated. And yes, looking forward to more of your updates. And hang in there, man. Like I said, it is a marathon, not a sprint. It doesn't matter when you get there. It just so matters when you get there. It just so matters that you get there, right? Not when, but that you get there. Don't be in a hurry, man, especially at your age. Do what you got to do. Live life. Be safe, of course. But you're all good, man. You're all good. Hang in there. It'll be all right. All right, after all of that, time to check in with our resident Superman superfan, Waliyu Mustafa. His email is simply titled Checkmate. Oh, I wonder what he could be talking about here. Oh, don't really have to worry or wonder about that one. He says, Hey Ray, well, the season 2 finale of Peacemaker did feel underwhelming in my opinion. But after a bit of a chat with Amr on Threads, I realized I may have been a bit hasty with my judgment, he says. This season was more of a character driven season than an action one. This post I found on Threads sums it all up. Let's see, what post is he talking about? Who is he talking about here as I click on this link? Oh, it's from a Mr. Billy Butcher. Photo credit from @YaBabyGal8 on TikTok, who says, things everyone needs to accept about Peacemaker Season 2. Okay, interesting. So it says, it's a character-driven story, not an action plot-driven story like Season 1. It's a story about no matter how effed up you think you are, there will always be others that see you in a brighter light than you ever would see yourself in. It follows the characters Chris desperately wanting to be happy when his real happiness has been with the 11th Street kids right in front of him this whole time. Adrian feeling left out by Chris but starting to connect with others more and more and not solely Chris by the end. Harcourt losing herself in anger and starting fights in bars but finding comfort in Chris by the end. Ads having to accept that her and Key will never work as their dreams would force the other to suffer. Econogoat, okay, choosing to finally stand up for himself and his friends and not get pushed around. It's not an action-driven story like the Butterflies invasion plot in the first season, but a season that explores our character's emotional journey. That's all great and awesome. I mean, but people can still be disappointed in that. You know what I mean? Like, people can still be underwhelmed by that. Like, this is what I don't get. Like, you know, for people saying these are things that people need to understand. Well, great. I understand all of that. I was still underwhelmed. So what? I mean, that's just my choice, emotionally speaking. I did want something more like the butterfly, like the Project Butterfly stuff in season 1. I didn't get it. That was not the choice that they made. Okay, I can be underwhelmed and still appreciate the direction that they took and everything that that post said. I can. And that's where I'm at with this, seriously. So to me, I look at it both ways. I look at it as, okay, if you were underwhelmed, don't be angry with James Gunn. He made his choice as a creative. You know, be angry with yourself because you've made the choice to be underwhelmed. If you're really going to be angry about it, see, I'm underwhelmed, but I'm not angry about it. And then the flip side of that is allow people to be underwhelmed, right? Unless they're like blaming James Gunn and being openly negative about things, there's no real reason to call them out. If somebody is underwhelmed like me and or Brooklyn Batman's another one like this, we're like, hey, you know, we kind of wanted the season, we wanted more out of the season in terms of the action. But that doesn't mean that we're, you know, setting fire to the whole rest of the DCU after that. We're not saying that the gun jammed or that we're calling into question the rest of what happens with the universe. We're not. We can feel that way and still be underwhelmed with how season 2 went. Like, you can't force us into not being underwhelmed by it. That's just, it works both ways. That's how subjectivity itself works. Goes both ways. So I would just say that, like with response to that particular post about things that everyone needs to accept. Oh, I accept them. That doesn't mean that I can't be underwhelmed, right? That's where I stand on that. But getting back to Wally's email, he says, listen, did I enjoy the episode? I sure did. We had a glimpse of a black hole from Superman, assuming it is the same one. Not sure. It sure looked like the same one, in my opinion. We saw Otis Berg. I love the fact that they went with that version of the name that was first used, to my knowledge, in this first Smallville comic that takes place after the show ended. And Sasha Bordeaux switched sides. And the emergence of Checkmate, the organization Amanda Waller founded, as it is in the comics. I don't know that Otis Berg switched sides, truthfully. Like, I know that he works for Argus, but they're in bed with Lex now, so I don't feel like he switched sides, truthfully. Bordeaux did. She most certainly did. She's absolutely a part of Checkmate instead of Argus at this point, so I'll go with that one. He says, then just as Chris was starting to get to a better place, along comes Rick Flag Sr. to ruin it for him and use him as a guinea pig on Salvation. Will we see him return? Time will tell, especially since we believe there won't be another season of Peacemaker. Maybe we'll get a spinoff called Checkmate. Who knows? Well, Gunn says that we're going to see him again. Like, he posted that, like, someone asked him that question point blank on Threads, and he said, yes, he's integral to the future of the DCU, so yeah, we're going to see him again at some point. Now, whether that is in Checkmate or in another season of Peacemaker, who knows? We'll find that out. But Wally says, I will say that this episode is exactly what James Gunn wanted. Sure, we can say it was overhyped, but we only have ourselves to blame for what expectations we had for it. It's not James's fault at all. As I said at the start, this was a very character-driven season. We saw each member of the 11th Street Kids learn to lean on each other more than they ever did. Chris believed he was the angel of death. Harcourt is looking for fights to feel better about herself. Adebayo is trying to get her spy business off the ground. Vigilante believes he can only be friends with Chris, and Economos just effing things up because he cannot stand up for himself. All of that changed, and they all saw themselves in a different light when they all poured out their souls to each other. But who was at the center of it all? Chris Smith, he says. The rest of them saw how much he meant to them, and that is what makes this final episode. So yeah, the season has been really good, he says, and the final episode did deliver. Maybe not how we wanted, but it still did the job that it was meant to do. Bravo, James Gunn. We will see how this continues in the DCU, whether that's in Supergirl, Man of Tomorrow, or another project. Don't forget Lanterns. I feel like I'm not the only one that skips over Lanterns because that's going to release before Supergirl. But yeah, for sure. And again, being underwhelmed by the finale does not mean that we just shit all over it. Does not mean that we just throw it aside and go, oh, this is crap. No. Or that we blame Gunn for it. No, certainly not. Like, there are people that are doing that, but that's not where we're coming from here, Wally, I would say. He says elsewhere, as it is New York Comic Con this past weekend, I have caught up on a few trailers, mainly Wonder Man, Strange New World Season 4, and Starfleet Academy. All look really good, and I can't wait for them to start. I have yet to see Tron Ares, he says, so I won't be able to listen to your review until I do so. If I am lucky, I may have seen it by the time you have read this, and that's a massive if. Well, I'm in reverse. I gotta watch the Wonder Man trailer. I haven't seen the Strange New World Season 4 trailer, but I did see the Starfleet Academy trailer. I should talk about that on the next episode of FLITE CHAT because, yeah, there's a decent amount that was revealed, if you will, was shown at New York Comic Con, was announced at New York Comic Con that I should talk about and will get into a bit, including that Wonder Man trailer when I finally watch it. And also the Strange New World Season 4 clip and whatnot. You know, crazily enough, I have not finished Strange New World Season 3. How about that? Like, after that fourth episode, and when the Peacemaker concurrency started happening, it really, like, threw my schedule for a loop, because it's like, well, what the hell? I've got to try and watch both of these. So, yeah, that just did not work out. But I will get caught up on it, most certainly. I have to. It's Star Trek. I got to get caught up on it. So I will. Don't worry about that. And as far as Tron Ares, I hear you. See it at your leisure, and then definitely listen to the episode, and we'll definitely have some thoughts and some discussions with respect to that, because I feel like that one's not going to go away anytime soon as far as the discussion is concerned about a number of things concerning the movie itself, and some things outside of the movie, if you will. So, for sure. He says, but that'll do it for me. A short one this week. I look forward to hearing your review of the finale of Peacemaker. As always, give my best to Shonda. You and both enjoy your week ahead. Yes, that review was posted yesterday, the Flightbox episode, so you can listen to that. He says, oh, one last thing. Yes, Estelle does bully Micah. I mean, today she kept pulling his hair and attacking him when he was in close proximity. We were telling her to be kind and not grab his hair, but she is an aggressive girl who does not like being told off, but she will learn. Though part of me does laugh at the fact that he is bigger than she is and doesn't fight back. Guess he'll learn the hard way too. Thank you, Wally Mustafa. Well, that's got to be tough on a boy, right? To, like, especially if you're raising a boy, not to hit girls and not to be overly aggressive and violent. Like, what does he do? Like, he's got to defend himself. Like, even against a girl, he's got to defend himself. What's he gonna do? That's a tough one. That's a real tough one. So I'm hoping, I'm rooting for Micah in this one, and hopefully they'll both learn to not be so aggressive with each other, and certainly in her case, not to be aggressive with him, because my goodness, yikes. Oh boy. But either way, I wish you all the best of luck with respect to that one. Thank you for the kind words and the kind thoughts as well, Wally. You always great to hear from you, good sir. Definitely appreciated. Looking forward to more insights, especially after you see Tron Ares and after you listen to the review of my Peacemaker season finale, if you will. Still talking about the Peacemaker Season 2 finale, I've got a post here from YouTube from at mwamba85dt that was posted on the release of the Flightbox episode, my review of the season finale of Season 2 of Peacemaker. And this individual, mwamba85dt, said, quote, I enjoyed the finale for what it was, and I keep saying this over and over, fans need to stop going into these comic book movies and TV shows with high expectations. Not everything is going to connect right off the bat. And when that didn't happen in Peacemaker Season 2, certain fanboys and DC fans are now all of a sudden turning on James Gunn because he's not doing the universe the way they want him to do it. And I keep saying this over and over. Both James Gunn and Kevin Feige are telling the stories they want to tell with both of these cinematic universes. Plus, both the DCU and MCU are both their visions, and we please can we please stop with wanting the comic book movies and TV shows to be the same as the comics? They are going to have elements of the source material, but it's not going to always be beat for beat. So we as fanboys need to stop with this obsessed complaining and bitching. That is all of MWamba85DT's post in response to this. And I agree with it, truthfully. And I'm already seeing, like, people, with the whole Salvation thing, I'm already seeing people talk about the Salvation Run comic. And so now, as if no lesson can be learned whatsoever with respect to fan expectations, now there are people excited because, oh, we're about to do Salvation Run. He's about to go into that comic run. No, he's not. No, he's not. He's not going to do that. And I think somebody even pointed out that he said he's not going to do that. He's going to draw elements from it. But again, this is where it becomes tough. And this is I talked about this on Patreon yesterday on Saturday Soliloquy about how as fans it can be difficult because when you have years of source material at your disposal, when you know about certain things that are mentioned, certain things that are going on in the comics, and your brain and your imagination just runs wild because you're like, oh, we heard this name, now this is going to happen, now he's going to do this comic arc, he's going to do this line. No, it doesn't mean that at all. Because remember, you're not the target audience. You're not the primary target audience. The primary target audience is the general audience that has never read the damn comic run that you're talking about. So they're going to draw upon it for inspiration. This is why, even though I read, and I brought this up too, even though I read all 97 issues and tie-ins of Civil War, I understand why Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios only drew upon pieces of it for Captain America Civil War and why they made it Captain America Civil War. Now, we can talk about how that's an Avengers movie through and through because it most certainly is. However, they couldn't go completely with what that comic line did for a number of reasons, not just because of the death of Captain America, but also because they didn't have rights to all the characters that were involved in it. And they had to tell a story that still fit into the universe that they had built through the first 12 movies up to that point, and also would attract the general audience still, right? Like, you can't do devout comic runs like you want them to do for anybody that's expecting that. That's never been a realistic expectation. It still isn't a realistic expectation. There's going to be liberties taken because movies are not comics and comics are not movies. And this is just going to keep happening, right? We're going to keep getting into a scenario where fans are going to be disappointed because it wasn't done this way and it wasn't done that way. And that's on them. It is. Like, me being underwhelmed by that season finale is on me. And I accept that. It's on me, right? I accept that fully. It does not color my opinion of what the DCU is going to be going forward. I mean, it does give me, like I said, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Now, whatever hype Gunn gives, whatever he talks about, it's like, okay, I'm going to wait and see. I'm still going to be intrigued. I'm still certainly going to be hyped for the success of this universe, but I'm going to wait and see exactly what you deliver us on a thematic scale for storytelling before I, get into this idea of my dreams and speculations on what I think you're going to do. No, none of that. None of that anymore. Now it's about seeing exactly what you're going to provide and what you're going to do, and which is fine. I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm great with that because adaptations, it's like if I read an adaptation, like for example, I'm going to read Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Do I want that movie to be an exact beat for beat, like, translation of the comic? No, I really don't expect that. I expect that the movie is going to take heavy inspiration from the comic, but it will diverge and it will, do some things differently for the general audience and for novices like me in order to fit within the DCU proper plan in that regard, because the DCU is happening on a different earth than that original comic, right? So to me, I feel like these are things as fans that we need to understand and accept. That's what we need to understand and accept, right? Never mind like all the other stuff in terms of why Peacemaker Season 2 ended the way it did. We just need to understand and accept that adaptation is at the forefront here, and it's not always going to go the way that we want it to go or the way that we dreamed that it would go as fans, depending on our level of knowledge and our level of exposure and experience to whatever that source material says in that regard. So yeah, I'm with you on that. But thank you, MWamba85DT, for your feedback. Indeed, greatly appreciated, good sir, from YouTube. All right, next up, let's check in with Alex De Silva. His email this week is titled Flight Chat 22, Nazis. I hate these guys. And this is a bit of a different email for Alex because he starts it off by saying, hey, Ray, no Star Trek in this email. I just didn't have any time this week. No worries. There's definitely been more than enough feedback in your emails that we've gotten past the whole Star Trek watch update stuff. I mean, when you resume, awesome. But here, let's get to the bulk of what you talked about this week. And starting off, you say, since you asked about my ethnicity, sure, I can share more. As you may or may not remember, I'm Brazilian. No, I did not remember that. Thank you for clarifying. All right, you are Brazilian. He says, much like America, Brazil has a long, complicated history of colonization, slavery, and immigration that has resulted in Brazil being a melting pot of all different races. It's common to encounter people with very white skin, very dark skin, and everything in between. On that scale, I guess I would fall in the light brown tan range. Okay. All right. Thank you for the background. Because no, seriously, if you mentioned that before, I did not remember. I 1000% will admit that I did not remember that. And now knowing that, I will endeavor to remember that going forward. Absolutely, for sure. Especially if any more representation matters discussions come up, which they most certainly will. Definitely. In fact, there's one centering around Tron Ares that may come up at some point, perhaps in a future flight chat. We'll see how that goes. But either way, thank you for that clarification. I appreciate the insight. So he says, anyway, now some quick sports talk and then onto the geeky stuff. Ooh, sports. All right. He says it's been a very good week for Boston sports. The Patriots had an unexpected win against the Bills in their own home, and as of the time of writing this, the Bruins are undefeated so far at 3-0. Things are looking up. Well, here, it's Sunday, and as of the time of recording this, all the early window games are done, and now we are just waiting for Sunday night football to start, which of course is my Lions versus the Kansas City Chiefs. So let's see. As far as the NFL scoreboard is concerned, how did your Patriots do? Well, your Patriots had a good win today against the New Orleans Saints. Drake May look good. Drake May look really good. I think you got a good one. And the Mike Vrabel thing, I mean, did I think Vrabel was going to succeed as the head coach in New England? Yes, most certainly I did. Because he's an OSU veteran, but still, he's good. He's a good coach. But yeah, Drake May, 18 to 26, 261 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was on fire in the first half, and yeah, that the Patriots are in a very intriguing spot. 4-2. You know, you've beaten Buffalo in Buffalo, so that's a big win on the road. Like that's impressive. That's a solid start to the season, most definitely. Very solid start to the season for the Pats. As for the Bruins, let's see. You said that they were 3-0 as of the time of you writing this email. Is that still the same? Well, yes, Boston is still 3-0, so they're off to a great start. The Wings right now are 1-1 because we absolutely horrifically disastrous home opener against Montreal, but it was definitely bounced back yesterday with a strong effort against Toronto, 6-3. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't have high hopes for the Wings in their centennial season, but yeah, you know how it is in the East. We're both in the same division, the Atlantic Division, and that division is arguably the toughest division in hockey. Florida, Boston, Montreal, Toronto, and then Tampa Bay, then Buffalo, then Ottawa. Yeah, it's the Atlantic Division in the Eastern Conference is the toughest division in hockey, I would say. Arguably the toughest division in hockey. I'm hard pressed to find a tougher division, to be honest with you. So yeah, you know what? I don't necessarily wish the Bruins best of luck overall, but we'll see how it goes. To be honest with you, you know how that goes with the original 6 rivalries and whatnot. Alex says, when it comes to the playoffs, I think it would be fun if we just got rid of national broadcasters entirely and implemented the following system instead. The lead commentator from each team should do the call together. That way they'd provide way more insight into the game than the national guys give you, and it'd make the playoffs much more personal for fans of the teams who've made it in. This is actually something MLB does for its Roku exclusive games. I remember being pleasantly surprised to discover the Red Sox commentator was doing the call alongside the opposing team's usual guy. It was pretty cool, honestly. You know, so you'd have the play-by-play from one and the color commentator from another. I could see that. That would be cool. Like if you alternated and like if they did like if one of them did the like the broadcast for one side and the other for the other side, right? And pick one of them will do the national broadcast and maybe flip flop for home and road. Like that would be cool. Like I'd be okay with that. And I think a lot of fans would be okay with that too, because yeah, the national guys just don't have the connection and they just don't understand. They mispronounce names, and it doesn't have the same connection for those of us that have watched the damn team and follow the team the entirety of the season and for however long we've been watching them. So yeah, I'm with you on that. That's not a bad idea, truthfully. And also the hot mic thing that I was talking about on Apple TV Plus, yeah, that unfortunately caught the better of our buddy Dan Dickerson, a longtime Tigers broadcaster. After we lost that 15-inning slug, which no, it was not an instant classic. It was bad hitting on both sides. Seriously, the Mariners hit just a little less worse than we did because we're horrible. Like, we can't have our superstars all go over except for Carey, Flip, and Carpenter. It's just no, we don't have superstars. We're not a good lineup, and we're owned by a cheap owner who isn't competitive and doesn't care about winning a World Series, and he hired a guy to do small ball for that, and can't get anybody in free agency, and just the Tigers suck as far as any type of competitiveness and whatsoever. But after we lost that game in 15 innings, Dan Dickerson was caught on a hot mic saying, "F this game replay," and he has since apologized for it. But many of us forgive him for that because, well, he was just like embodying and speaking aloud what we all thought. F this game recap and F this team and like how they have failed and how they're just the organization, not necessarily the team itself. You can't necessarily blame the players for being themselves because the players are themselves. That you can't just manufacture or beam talent like into them. But yeah, it's just he spoke what we were all feeling, and yeah, that's where we are with that. So, yeah, just bringing that one up. But I'm with you on the local broadcaster angle, to be honest with you. He says, do you think there's a realistic chance of the sci-fi concept of the singularity to actually happen in the real world, or is that something that will only exist in stories? What is the singularity? Hang on, let me look that up. Okay, so assuming that we're talking about the same thing here, just Googling this, it says the singularity is a hypothetical future point in time when technological growth, particularly in artificial intelligence, accelerates beyond human control and comprehension. This event is expected to cause an intelligence explosion where superintelligent AI can improve itself faster than humans can, leading to irreversible and unpredictable changes to human civilization. While some believe it could lead to unprecedented progress and the transcendence of human limitations, others fear it could lead to the replacement or extinction of humanity, as superintelligent AI may not align with human values. I don't know if it will actually happen. I think that there have been enough horror stories and cautionary tales to suggest the dangers of it happening. I will say the possibility is there, but how realistic that possibility is, I mean, I don't know. It's a great question because I feel like a lot of the AI, it's not done for like scientific purposes. It's done for like capitalistic purposes, and it's really only designed for the purposes of making money. And I think that remains a limiter in that regard because then, the aspirations don't go quite as far as like Terminator if you're just trying to make machines with the intent of making money, right? Like if that's all it is for capitalistic gain, then I think that could end up being a saving doomsday grace, if you will, right? Like it's never going to go quite as far as it could because the only people that can afford to do it are only interested in making money, to be honest with you. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, realistic, sure. I mean, there's a chance of it. There's never there's more than a non-zero chance of it. I'll put it that way for sure. But here we go. Some more Scarathon updates. He says, I watched It Follows, and this movie was terrifying. He says, no exaggeration. This was one of the scariest movies I've ever watched, and no, it didn't use jump scares to get me. Here's a very quick rundown of the premise. A girl has sex with her date and discovers that through the act of sex, he's passed on a curse to her. The curse is that a malignant force is now hunting her down and trying to kill her. But here are the rules the force operates by. It can take the form of any random person, known or unknown, but it can only walk toward you. It can't run, it can't jog, it can only walk to you. Once it reaches you, you can escape by running or driving really far away, but that just means that now the malignant force will begin to walk toward your new location until it eventually reaches you again. I'm getting chills just writing the summary up from remembering some of the images present in the movie. Once you learn that these are the rules of this world, you spend the entire movie on high alert and literally scanning the background of every scene, looking for one weird, unusual person who's walking in a straight line toward the main character. This movie has never made me so aware of background actors, he says. Truly terrifying stuff, but so worth the watch. I know you're someone who isn't a fan of jump scares and appreciates horror that has a good story to tell, so I really think you'd enjoy this one. Well, it's interesting that you bring this up, Alex, because let me double check here, but Lionsgate Limited, because I've been talking lately about physical media, and I need to talk more about physical media because I really am a physical media like savant and most certainly a collector. I have a library, and I really need to talk more about my library and building my library for those of us that are physical media enthusiasts. But I collect steelbooks. And I talked earlier about how there is one on the way, directed by Robert Eggers, that will arrive here in a couple of days, and I definitely need to review it when it arrives. It was one that I had pre-ordered months ago, And I've never seen a Robert Eggers movie before, so it's one that I definitely am intrigued to watch to get a feel for what everybody's been saying about Robert Eggers. But you bring up the movie It Follows. And Lionsgate, Lionsgate, of course, they've recently, within the last year, they've started their own steelbook releases called Lionsgate Limited. And they have a number of other films that have been released over the last couple of years, like Cabin in the Woods and whatnot, that are part of the Lionsgate Limited family. But they've been releasing other ones officially as part of it on their website. Like the Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, Jackie Brown, I just recently picked up, after Terrence Stamp's passing, I picked up the Limey because they brought that back out of their warehouse and put it back up on sale. So I have that and a number of others, right? And I also have that Cabin in the Woods that I mentioned. Well, one of the films that apparently is available is It Follows. I'm assuming that this is the recent version. Like, there's never been, like, this is an original film, right? Like, here we go. I'm reading the description. They say you never forget your first. This couldn't be more horrifyingly true for once carefree teen girl Jay, Micah Monroe from Longlegs, although I did just recently see her for the first time in Independence Day Resurgence because I did watch that movie and I never reviewed it. I should have. It says after a night of intimacy with Hugh, Jay Weary from Animal Kingdom, passion turns to paranoia when Hugh informs Jay that she is now the latest carrier of a fatal curse passed on through sex. As Jay is haunted by nightmarish visions, her teenage friends dismiss her ravings until they also see the ghastly ghouls. Now they must band together to break the chain and help Jay escape the horrors that always seem to be lurking just a few steps behind in this chilling, offbeat cult classic. 10th anniversary, because it's 10 years old, wow. Presented in Dolby Vision, 10th anniversary 4K edition, presented in Dolby Vision HDR, available for the first time on 4K in the US. Steelbook art by Phantom City Creative. New 4K master produced by Second Sight Films. Original post-production facility approved by director David Robert Mitchell, which also includes a bunch of special features, 2 audio commentaries, new interviews, and an essay, The Architecture of Loneliness, a video essay by filmmaker Joseph Wallace, plus a critics commentary hosted by Scott Weinberg and a conversation with film composer Disaster Piece, along with theatrical trailer and poster art gallery. Okay. So yeah, I imagine this is the same film that you're talking about. And so you're saying it's a horror film that doesn't rely on jump scares and has a good story to tell. Okay. I am intrigued. I will have to remember this because, yes, it is on the Lionsgate Limited website in 4K Steelbook form. All right, thank you for the recommendation. Appreciate that. We'll see if we'll see what we can do about that. It's already October 12th, so we still got 3 weeks. As I said earlier, we got 3 weeks left in the month of October because October's got 31 days. He says, next I watched The Descent, which is about a group of women who go spelunking in North Carolina, and for the sake of spoilers, let's just say they discover some things beneath the earth. Yep, add this movie to list of reasons why I never need to spend any time underground. Oh, yep, I'm with you on that. Yep, nope, don't do the underground. Nope, don't do the caves, don't do the underground. Nope, absolutely not. Gotcha. Okay, The Descent. I've heard of that one too. He says, I also went to New York this past week to catch the Broadway show Stranger Things The First Shadow. This play is an official prequel to the TV show and tells the origin story of one of the show's main villains. As soon as I finished watching the play, I was filled with a huge desire to rewatch the show from season 1, episode 1, and I'm going to do that just before the final season premieres next month, he says. I feel like every time I see something on Broadway or the West End, I witness some type of technological innovation that I haven't seen before. Not gonna lie, he says, I used to think Broadway shows were lame and corny, but once you obtain an appreciation for the art form, it's the same as watching an amazing 2.5-hour movie, but in a much more immersive way. The Stranger Things play featured characters coming out into the aisles of seats, massive props unexpectedly descending from the ceiling, and more crazy effects happening on stage. It was amazing. Yeah, I've seen plays before, obviously, but it's been a long time. And theater, like live theater, is actually something that I would love, like Shonda and I, to like go to. Like I've often thought of the idea of like going to the opera and like seeing on stage plays. The area that we currently live in doesn't really lend itself to that. So we need to relocate to an area that has way more of that accessible, or we would have to do what you just did and go to New York or somewhere, or Chicago or somewhere like that, and see plays like there, like in a different locale from where we live in that regard, which we could do that. But yeah, I'm intrigued by that. I hadn't thought about that. The technological innovation and the different things that they can do now with respect to plays. Yeah, Because I'm just thinking of people on a stage with traditional sets and whatnot, but you're talking about traditional sets and people on a stage, but also with other things descending from the ceiling and people coming out into the aisles. Yeah, no, that sounds like a lot of fun. That sounds like a very enjoyable and very much more immersive experience. And so yeah, I'm with you on that. I would like to definitely see some more Broadway shows. Definitely see some Broadway shows, period, to be honest with you. So I'll have to remember that. Add that to the list of things that I seriously want to and need to do, truthfully. Alex says this week we also got the finale of Peacemaker. On the podcast, James Gunn talked about how he was really uncomfortable with the idea of writing his wife kissing another man. If it were me, yeah, I don't care. I never could bring myself to write such a thing. Story be damned. Yep. And I thought about that too. I did. I definitely thought about that. Like just sitting there, like, yeah, you wrote your wife, uh, kissing John Cena passionately, and I wondered how long that was going to last. It did not long. It did not last as long as it might have. So part of me wondered, yeah, how uncomfortable was that? Yeah, no, I get it. I completely get it. I 100% understand. Definitely uncomfortable, but hey, it's all about the craft and whatnot, right? As actors and creatives, so intriguing. He says, I haven't looked into any of the online reactions to this episode, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people were upset with the finale, given the lack of any big cameos and the lack of a big action climax. Yep, there's definitely a divide. We've been talking about it all this episode, and certainly I talked about it in Flightbox and also on Patreon. He says, on the cameo piece, I'm not upset about that at all. I never go into things expecting cameos. I literally tell myself not to expect anything so that I don't get upset, and that strategy worked out beautifully for me in this case. Yeah, that's not a bad strategy. It really isn't. For fans like us that are initiated into this world and all the source material, that's not a bad idea. Tell ourselves not to expect anything so that we don't get upset. Great strategy, I think, can be very effective for us. He says, I was surprised, though, at the lack of a big action showdown given this is a superhero show. I would have expected there to be some more action with Keith and or Flag Sr. It messed with my sense of pacing, and when the characters created checkmate, it felt like there was still half an episode left to unfold. Yeah, right there. That's a great way of putting it. I actually would agree with you, Alex. And again, I do appreciate the subversion, right? I do appreciate that it goes into that it does do a different thing than what we were expecting. But I'm with you. It totally messed with my sense of pacing because I was totally expecting a big showdown action piece and it never happened. And I'm with you. It did feel like there was still half an episode left to unfold. Now that doesn't mean it was a bad episode. That doesn't mean that I have a massive issue with it. It definitely, that's where the underwhelming part of it comes into play with respect to my expectations. Again, as you said, for it being a superhero show. But I'm not going to fault James Gunn for going in a different direction with it. He went in a very different direction with this particular show, and it is what it is. That's where I'm at with it. It is what it is. So, yeah, not mad about it, not blaming him for it, just he went in a different direction. He's more than capable and more than like able to do that, has every right to do that, I should say, as the creative and as the writer of this story. So, and again, the dramatic and the character work that is there was really good, right? It just wasn't a big action set piece that we were expecting. He says in the podcast, Gunn also stated that we'll be seeing the characters from Peacemaker again in not too long. So we'll have to wait and see if he means something currently in production or something still being developed. So I'm guessing the Checkmate group formed at the end is going to serve a similar function to Argus, he says, with the major difference being that Checkmate will operate for the good of the people as opposed to Argus operating for the good of the government. I'm going to make a prediction, he says, that one of Checkmate's principal storylines moving forward will be them traveling back to the Nazi Earth and liberating the people of color being oppressed there. I find it tough to believe that, knowing the existence of the Nazi Earth, the heroes of the DCU will just sit back and let the people suffering there continue to suffer. Looks like this will be our last DCU project for a long time, but that's all right with me. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. Live long and prosper, Alex. Well, only so long as it takes for Lanterns to premiere, because again, Lanterns is supposed to premiere before Supergirl. I think all of us, maybe more, clearly more than just me, is forgetting that. I've definitely been forgetting that, but yeah. So between now and whenever Lantern shows up, we should be getting a trailer or some promotional stuff for that within the next month or so, I would think. Just my speculation on that. With respect to your prediction, your guess, I am unwilling to make that prediction because I am unwilling to predict or speculate any more big, huge, broad strokes with anything involved in the DCU. I'm unwilling to do that now. This particular season finale has now basically taught me the same lesson that Rian Johnson taught me with The Last Jedi, and I will no longer make those predictions. I will no longer make those speculations, if you will. So while your idea sounds awesome, I'm not setting myself up for any more disappointment. So I love that idea, and I love how David Denman talked about how Keith, it seems like the beginning of his villain origin story. But yeah, until we see him, until we get any indication that that's going to happen, I'm just going to let it ride, and I'm just going to let the DCU take us on the ride that it's willing to take us on in that regard. So no more speculation of that from me, anyway. But I like your idea. I do like your idea. It would be a cool idea, but we'll see how it goes. But that's it for Alex this week. Thank you as always for the feedback, especially the sports stuff and really all the sports and the nerdy stuff. And yeah, I'm gonna think about It Follows because it's always been one that in the back of my head is like, wonder what that is like, and my redefining of, watching horror films, because there are so many that I haven't watched and I've avoided actively over the last number of years. And, like I said, with my awakening, thanks to my podcast brother Scott, some years back, is like, okay, no, let's watch, find some of the horror movies that don't rely on the jump scares and actually have character development and plot and whatnot to tell in that regard. And you're saying It Follows is one of those. So yeah, my interests may be aligned with respect to that one. So thank you for that recommendation. We'll see how that goes, good sir. And as always, thank you for your feedback. Always greatly appreciated. And finally, we will close out this week's Flight Chat with an email from Jared Cardos. This one's titled, I Believe in Miracles Because of You. Oh, he is quoting Leota Adebayo from the Peacemaker Season 2 finale. How about that? He says, hey Ray, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to throw out some thoughts about the last Flight Chat and share my thoughts on the last episode of Peacemaker and the season overall. He says, I'd forgotten about that announcement of the second Simpsons movie until it was mentioned here. I also have to say that I also haven't really kept up with The Simpsons for a while. I think the last time I watched was either the crossover with Family Guy or Futurama, whichever one was most recent. That said, I'm looking forward to this movie, he says. I think they know that for a movie, they really have to deliver their A game, and they did that before with the first movie, which is honestly one of my favorite bits of Simpsons media. Funny, heartfelt, and insanely quotable, especially in these times. Sir, I'm afraid you've gone mad with power. Of course I have. Have you ever tried going mad without power? It's boring. No one listens to you. That's fantastic. It's definitely emblematic of like the first 10 seasons of Simpsons jokes. It really is. Although that first movie came out well after the first 10 years of The Simpsons. That came out in 2006. So yeah, they were in the thick of it, like, into to the more extraneous seasons, to be honest with you, if you will. They more extraneous from the standpoint of a lot of us that I've had this conversation with coworkers and people in real life before about how when it comes to anything quotable, anything memeable from The Simpsons, most, if not all of it, seems to come in those first 10 years, those first 10 seasons. It's like, wow, something about the first 10 years of that show that really just resonates and continues to stick with a lot of us, truthfully. And that's not to say that the rest of the show is garbage. It's just, yeah, it's just intriguing how it always comes back to that. But yeah, new Simpsons movie, I'm with you. I think they do feel like they need to, bring out their A game. Hey, we saw that first one, and that first one was good. It was a good film for sure. So we'll see where they go with this next one in a couple of years. He says, in talking about how Shazam might be used in the DCU, I agree it's unlikely we'll get what we saw in the past movies in the DCU. I get the feeling that when we see anything related to Shazam in the DCU, it'll be something more like the classical interpretation of the character and not based on the New 52 iteration like the movies. I also wonder if maybe doing Shazam in an animated format might help set it apart either as a TV show or maybe even as a movie. I could absolutely see that. I think you're spot on with respect to going more classic and certainly in animated form, depending on what James Gunn and Peter Safran's DCU plans are. Even if Shazam is part of that within the next 10 years, we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I think I like that idea, to be honest with you. He says at one point, someone talked about how Chris from the other Earth might have been as angry and hateful because he was hiding his bisexuality. And I think there are some actual hints of that in the previous episodes. When our Chris is talking to Harcourt 2 about possibly getting back together, she talks about how her Chris had some curiosities, which felt like an odd way of saying he was unfaithful, unless she was implying that he was experimenting with someone he wasn't supposed to. I didn't catch this, but when we saw Chris 2's secret drug stash, he says, I saw people online point out that they saw a drug known as poppers, which is popular among gay men, especially in the party scene. So while they don't make it explicit, because we're not really following that Chris. There are definitely some hints that he was hiding his attraction to men and it was eating him up inside. Turns out living in and enforcing a fascist regime isn't all that good for you. Crazy, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, you'd love to teach that particular lesson to a lot of people in real life, Jared. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say that part out loud? Good. Meant to say it out loud. Yep. Crazy, isn't it? He says, finally, there's a surprisingly, or maybe not so surprising, controversial finale to Peacemaker Season 2. Overall, I can see some of the reasons why this would not be the ideal finale for some people. I know I was expecting something with more action and with Chris donning the Peacemaker armor one more time. But I think what we got worked because of the incredibly honest and real performances by these actors. The scene where the rest of the gang finally find Chris and convince him to come back to them was just as engrossing as any big fight scene could have been. It speaks to the quality of these actors and the material they're working with, and the willingness to be bold and go for some deaths we rarely get to see in these big superhero shows. The only show I can think of that matched this was Doom Patrol, and that's damn high praise. Doom Patrol, okay, I'm with you on that. And mind you, I never watched the last season. I saw the first 3 seasons, and yes, you're absolutely right on that. That's a very good point. And man, you talk about some emotional complexities with that cast and crew and that show. Oh man, Doom Patrol. I loved that show. That show was fantastic for so many reasons. But yeah, and that's why, again, everything you're saying here, Jared, that's why even though I was underwhelmed with the finale, I still respect the choices that were made. I respect what James Gunn did. I respect the direction that he took it because it is different. It's very different, something that we do rarely get to see in these big superhero shows. I'm with you on that. And so, yeah, I can respect that choice. I can. I can respect that decision. And I can say, you know what? If you're going to continue to really be defiant against giving us MCU 2.0 and you really want to make the DCU different and stand out, I'm with you on that. I am. I'm completely with him on that. And I definitely support, his intentions with respect to that going forward. He says, as for the major events in the episode, I was expecting some sort of move where a gang would decide to go independent, and that really was done. That was really well done, he says. Although I wish they had explained why they chose to call themselves Checkmate. I know it's from the comics. I read some of the more recent volumes of Checkmate back in the day, but I'm curious as to why the 11th Street kids would call themselves Checkmate. I'll just put that as one of the many reasons I hope that the reason we're not getting a Peacemaker Season 3 is so that we can get a Checkmate Season 1. Yeah, I hope that even if it ends up being Peacemaker Season 3, although I do think the possibilities of being Checkmate Season 1 are pretty high, I hope that there is some type of brief explanation as to where the name comes from, right? Because it makes sense for them to explain that as a detail, to be honest with you, rather beyond the Easter egg for those of us initiated into the comics, for sure. Jared says, I was not expecting that specific turn with Flag Sr. I knew he wasn't going to be a good dude going forward, but I wasn't quite expecting braying with a bunch of coked out Luther lackeys level of bad. I've heard of people suggesting that he had to have been brainwashed or possessed by Luther. While I do want to rewatch Creature Commandos to get a better handle on Flag Sr. as a character, from some of his actions in this show, I think it's possible to say the power of his new position has just gotten to his head. He certainly wouldn't be the first person to have had power corrupt him. That is true. And I've seen more than a few people go with the whole brainwashing thing as well, but I feel like the corruption angle and descending into the vengeance factor definitely could absolutely corrupt him enough to that point where it wouldn't have to be brainwashing, and it's still manipulation by Luther either way, right? Whether it's brainwashing or not, it's still hardcore manipulation from Lex going forward, and he's going to pay dearly for it. One would think. He says, and I really was not expecting them to reference the Salvation Run storyline. It's been a minute since I read that one, but while I thought it was just okay, the idea of it is interesting for the DCU, and I'm curious to see how and where this is implemented in the DCU going forward. So long as you understand, and I'm sure you do, Jared, that they're not going to do the Salvation Run storyline, whatever that is, right? And I haven't read it. I've barely heard of it, heard tell of it here and there, but yeah, they're not going to do the exact storyline like some others are already expecting is going to be the case, right? It's going to be adaptation, but you understand that, Jared. I know you do. He says, and it ended in things in a really interesting way for Chris. Man, Gunn is really not going to end the allegations that he just wants to make Chris suffer. There's a cruel irony to that ending. Chris started out completely dejected and wanting to escape to another world to cope with his bad home life. And just when things are turning around and he's becoming happy and fulfilled, he's forced into another world anyway. One can almost picture the Rod Sterling monologue as the Twilight Zone theme music starts to play. Just have to take solace in that he's almost sure to appear again at some point, and maybe, just maybe, Gunn will let him be happy again. So overall, while I would have been into a more action-packed finale, he says, I still came out satisfied with what we got, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where these characters and these plots go in the DCU. I think that'll be enough for this email. Looking forward to your future episodes. Jared, as always, thank you for the feedback. Greatly appreciated. Yeah, as far as the suffering of Chris Smith, Gunn, like I said earlier, has said on Threads that he will return. He is an instrumental part of the DCU going forward, so we'll see him again. But whether or not his suffering ends remains to be seen. Clearly, it's not over anytime soon, especially at the hands of Rick Flag Sr. So we'll just have to wait and see for the future of the DCU and Chris Smith's role in it going forward. But I know who's happy about it, and that's John Cena, because imagine, would he have thought 4 years ago that based on his one role in the Suicide Squad, he'd get 2 full seasons of a show on HBO, and now, a continued presence in a major cinematic universe, a major comic book cinematic universe? I mean, this is like ascending to more than whatever, he would get on Marvel's side, right? Like if we were comparing him, and I said the other day that we need to, stop the whole wrestler turned actor thing. No, he's full blown an actor at this point. But let's just say comparing him to Dave Bautista, right? And nothing against Dave Bautista, but look at what John Cena has commanded here in the early throes of the DCU compared to Dave Bautista over in the MCU. And Bautista's probably at some point going to join the DCU at some point, one would think, right? I think that's still going to happen too, right? Because based on, the changes he's made in his lifestyle, he can't really be Drax anymore. He doesn't need to be, because the Guardian storyline is done and Gunn is over here now, right? But as far as what Cena has done, I mean, my goodness, to command that character and to really be given the gravitas and the weight and the range to be able to pull off this character the way that he has through 2 full seasons of a show, all the way back from the Suicide Squad into this, and also have the cameo in Superman, and to know that we're going to get more of him in the DCU going forward. I mean, he's got to be happier than a pig in shit. Seriously, he's got to be really, really happy to be in this particular position, and very fortunate and very grateful to be this connected and be this integral to the beginnings, the birth of a shared cinematic comic book universe, stretching across movies, television, live action, and animation as well. So yeah, he's in a great spot right now, and I look forward to seeing the future of it as well. So as always, Jared, like I said earlier, thank you for the feedback indeed. Looking forward to more of it as we move forward. And there you have it, another week of feedback here in the books here on Flight Chat. Thank you so much to all of you that sent in your feedback emails. Thank you to John R. Thank you to Amari Daniels for his list catch-up. Thank you to Amr for his feedback and his catch-up and whatnot. Hang in there, buddy. Thank you to Wally. Thank you to Alex. Thank you to Jared. And also, thank you to YouTuber Mwamba85DT for their feedback as well on the most recent episode of Flightbox over at youtube.com/theflightcast. Thank you so much for your feedback as well. Thank you to everyone for listening to the show. Thank you everyone for your feedback. For those of you that wish to join the feedback circle and talk about movies, TV, and other sort of media, whether it's stuff that we talked about today with Peacemaker season 2 finale or other things going on as well, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the Flightcast, on BLUESKY at Flightcast. You can comment on the posting like Mwamba did on the Flightcast YouTube page at youtube.com/Flightcast. The YouTube channel, I should say. Flightcast is a YouTube channel that you can comment on the posting for this episode for as well. There's also the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care. Stay safe out there. Have a great week, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.